Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 21, Longevity Pill. Over the years, there had been a large number of gifted students who studied at the Cloud sect. Some disciples had a penchant for learning and progressed rapidly. Within a year, those disciples passed several levels, going from bone refining level up to the level of nature refining. There were also disciples still at the bone refining level that were comparable in strength to those who were a half step into the nature level, and could easily move objects that were as heavy as a mountain. In contrast to them, Zen seemed so ordinary. For someone at the organ refining level, Zen's execution was perfect. He not only withstood an assault from 4 men at marrow refining level but, after that, he was still strong enough to run past the 30-mile stone tablet. However, in the eyes of the elder whose eyebrows were silver, and Master Su, Zen was an intermediate, not excellent candidate. Took Master Su's Drizzle Peak as an example, while it ranked last among the 33 peaks at the Cloud sect, there were 3 disciples at least, who were able to resist that kind of attack and were able to pass the initial exam successfully. Therefore, neither of them believed Zen was remarkable. To be fair, ordinarily, it was impossible for someone at the organ refining level to withstand the enormous pressure of 50,000 pounds. Yet, Zen had, all the while been standing erect with no sign of giving up. It was a miracle that he managed to beat any challenge. Whether it had been the Drizzle Peak, or any of the other 32 peaks at the Cloud sect, there weren't many people who were as strong or powerful as him. Sensing tension in the air, Master Su had the urge to save Zen from the mighty force. But, just as she was about to step forward, the elder with white eyebrows stopped her. "Don't be in such a hurry. Watch him," stated the chief elder as he watched Zen. Viewing Zen carefully, Master Su was amazed to see streaks of red, blood-like liquid trickling from Zen's body. "He's refining his organs. This is absolutely astounding," she exclaimed in awe. Unlike the 4 men who attacked Zen earlier, both Master Su and the chief elder with white eyebrows were experienced and knowledgeable. At one glance, they recognized that the red fluid wasn't blood. Instead, it was the impurities being flushed from the organs. For most people, it took a long time to cleanse their organs. To their astonishment, Zen exuded a great deal in a short period. The boy's future, the chief elder stopped talking mid-sentence. He started asserting that Zen would have a bright future ahead of him. However, in a high-pitched voice, Master Su suddenly cut in, "His future will be gloomy, won't it?" "Master Su, what do you mean?" asked the elder confused. "I don't think he is very competent," said Master Su, smiling. "It was pure luck that he scraped through the initial exam. Well, as for the present scene, we should act like it never happened." Of course, the chief elder was not an idiot, and he understood what she was attempting, and it was evident that what she was saying was absurd. According to the rules of the Cloud sect, top management was to receive a step-by-step report of every exceptionally gifted disciple discovered during an initial exam, and it was equally clear that Zen's case fell precisely under this rule. "Let me think," murmured the chief elder examiner, feeling torn, and wanting to think a moment. His thoughts were troubled by this. It would be no problem to turn a blind eye to Zen's previous performance. But with what he was witnessing now, there could be no doubt the young man was the sort of special refiner that only occurred once in 1,000 years. It was too much to hide the truth. "No need to hesitate," declared Master Su after seeing concern etched in the chief examiner's face. Her dazzling smile faded slowly. "Do you want me to reveal the Emperor's token?" When he heard the words, "the Emperor's token," the chief examiner coughed harshly. Ever since Master Su arrived at the Cloud sect, his health was progressively getting worse. As long as there was an initial exam, the chief examiner was troubled by her. So, what was the Emperor's token? Any person in possession of the Emperor's token had the right to order the man in the Burning Sky Palace to perform any act, including commit murder, slaughter, genocide, or any other atrocity. Accordingly, people became scared at the mention of the Emperor's token. No one and nothing on earth could stop the man. he was nearly all-powerful. But, this was under the assumption that the person giving the instructions had one of the emperor's tokens. Otherwise, you were not able to order the man. In over 200 years, the Burning Sky Palace released only 6 of these emperor's tokens total. One piece had thankfully gone to the Ouyang clan of the imperial capital, and it was revered in their main shrine. In the past, the Ouyang was an insignificant, small clan. Utilizing the control that came with the emperor's token, the family became one of the top 10 noble clans throughout the empire. Although the prosperity of the clan came to the family through their diligent administration, the emperor's token undoubtedly played a significant role. Who would dare offend a person that possessed the emperor's token? Even though the young man is indeed very talented, he isn't worth the emperor's token. Master Su is exaggerating, thought the chief examiner. Well aware of Master Su's character, the chief elder knew she was bluffing him. But he knew better, she would possibly use the emperor's token if he kept failing to realize her purpose. Clearly, the elder would consent to her request. Since you have decided, we won't report the matter, the chief examiner informed Master Su willingly. Okay, but, keep in mind. I want everyone to be in the dark about him. Remove all the pictures that were recorded onto the picture slab. Can't let anyone but you and I see. By the way, we had better shut him down. If people in other peaks know, we'll be in big trouble. Warned Master Su. When she had finished speaking to the elder examiner, she went back to lustfully ogling Zen and appreciating him as one did to an uncarved gem. During their discussion, Zen was concentrating on allowing the warm current to wash through his body as he absorbed the pressure. The impurities of his organs were almost cleared up. He took a deep breath as he was quaked by a violent shudder ripping through his body, which brought a flood of red contaminants pouring from his pores as if he were bleeding heavily. Finally, I've reached the highest degree of the organ refining level. Soon, I'll begin marrow refining as long as I cross that mark. While Zen contemplated, his eyes shone with pleasure. He was delighted at the pace of his progress. He was advancing so rapidly, that it wouldn't be long before he could defeat Perrin and rescue his sister from Hell Mountain. Right now though, he was excited to continue refining, thinking that, if he did, he might be able to achieve the marrow refining level. But, his legs began to shake under the enormous pressure bearing down on him until eventually he couldn't stand and was at the point of collapse. It was at that moment he felt someone seized him by the neck and pulled him out of the road. Feeling the pressure bearing down on him diffused, Zen turned easily and saw that it was the chief examiner, supervisor for the initial exam, who had hauled him away. Standing next to the elder examiner, was a girl, as beautiful as a fairy, attired in green. She was gorgeous. You passed the initial exam. Why haven't you left? What are you still doing here? Asked the chief elder sharply. After all, the boy did cause the unpleasantness of today, thought the elder chief examiner. Being scolded by the elder, Zen remained calm as he apologized. Sorry, I didn't realize I wasn't allowed to be here, sir. Well, now you know. Take your jade pendant to substitute an entrance card, then go wait for your entrance exam, commanded the chief elder examiner. Not wanting to irk the chief examiner, Zen began to walk away politely. After a few steps, he looked back and asked, "Excuse me, sir. If I am lucky enough to be accepted into the Cloud sect, may I come back here?" Using pressure to refine his body, Zen had accelerated his refining speed and was slightly addicted to it. At Zen's request, the elder smiled coldly and said, "This is the place for those who have reached the nature level to practice. If you want to come, you need to use your earned points. We won't hold you accountable for today's illegal trespassing. But, don't tell anyone. You have to remember to keep today a secret." Nodding meekly, Zen scurried away. After Zen was gone, the elder turned to Master Su and asked, "What do you think?" "Well," Master Su answered offhandedly, "in return, I have this for you." She felt some compassion for the old man. On Master Su's finger was a beautiful 5-colored floret ring, studded with 5 different colored gems. As the chief elder watched, she gently touched the ring with her finger, and instantly, a bright silver pill popped up which she casually tossed at him. The chief elder was tremendously shocked when he saw what it was. "What an extraordinary and generous person you are." The chief elder's voice trembled as he thanked her. In the chief elder's palm was a longevity pill. One of these pills could extend a person's life a year. The longevity pill was extremely rare, precious medicine, especially to an elderly man. They said time was money. But, even the wealthiest people in the world didn't have enough riches to buy time. One more year meant a lot to those who were in their waning years. It was entirely unexpected for Master Su to award the chief elder examiner with such a precious gift. Had it not been for fear of being humiliated, he would have been in tears right there. Chapter 22. Zen's Anger. As Zen returned to the square along the same path, he felt comfortable. Even though the same pressure was weighing down on his body, he felt as light as a feather, as if he could fly with just a simple jump. Now that he was at the peak of the organ refining level, his every breath could last longer time than before. Zen also noticed an improvement in his strength. As soon as he could see the square and the pressure decreased, Zen found that he could run the rest of the way. Those who had not passed the initial exam had already left, and the participants who had succeeded had gathered in the square for the next round. Zen looked around and approximated that about 1,000 participants were in the square. Compared to the tens of thousands of participants before the exam, it seemed as though the elimination rate was up to 90%. Just as he entered the square, Zen could see a man waving at him excitedly. He moved closer to the man and smiled when he saw that it was Norimo. "Hi, Zen, here, come here, you passed the initial exam. Congratulations." Nori looked at Zen's jade pendant, which was now shining bright red. Zen nodded and said, "Do I need to exchange the jade pendant for the disciple card? Where can I make the exchange?" "Yes, you need to collect the disciple card. And I know where to make the exchange. I just got my disciple card. Follow me," Nori answered as he tugged at Zen's sleeves excitedly. On seeing Nori's enthusiasm, Zen smiled and nodded. Then, they headed toward a corner of the square where a long table had been placed. On the way to the corner, Nori explained, "Here we are. After exchanging the pendant for the disciple card, we become temporary disciples of Cloud Sect." With Nori's help, Zen was able to take off the jade pendant and ready to make the exchange. Behind the table, 2 people from Cloud Sect were busy with the exchange. One of them glanced at Zen and then took the jade pendant from him. He examined it carefully for a while. He appeared to be checking the information recorded in the jade pendant. When done, the man pulled out a small wooden board wrapped in silver and a tiny graver. He started to carve on the wooden board. To Zen, it appeared as though the man was waving the graver around the wooden board quickly. The only indication of the engraving process was the fine sawdust pooling on the table. Even before Zen could gauge his movements, the man had finished. The speed with which he had completed his task added mystery to the man's skill. When Zen took the small wooden board and glanced at it, 2 words, "Zen Luo," had been neatly engraved on it. Zen smiled at the man. The man nodded and said, "Take care of your disciple card and wait there." Zen bowed in acknowledgement. With the exquisite disciple card held in both hands, he said, "Thank you." Even though he had been a slave for 2 years, Zen was still a courteous young man. Once he had stepped away from the table, Zen examined his disciple card. The silver frame wrapping around the antique wooden board glistened in the sun. It was typical Cloud Sect style, classic and elegant. The freestyle strokes with which his name had been engraved on the board showed the other side of Cloud Sect, free thinking. Zen played with it for a while and then walked to Nori. As Zen stood in the corner with Nori, he studied the other participants. The square was filled with nervous energy. 1,000 people stood in the square, waiting silently. Some were standing alone in corners, just as Zen and Nori were. Some had gathered together in small groups. Regardless of whether they were alone or within a small group, they were secretly observing the other participants. The initial exam did not require the participants to compete with each other. As long as the participants completed the distance prescribed by Cloud Sect, they moved to the next stage. Unless they provoked someone, just as Zen had faced trouble with the 4 men, passing the exam was quite simple. However, the next test would be more difficult because it included an elimination system. 80% of the people present would not pass the next exam. A long time passed before instructors came to the square. Under their guidance, the applicants got together and then left the square. They trudged through the difficult trails of Cloud Sect until they reached an even mountain. Compared with the other steep mountains of Cloud Sect, this mountain was not high or broad. But it was strange that the whole mountain was blood red. Not only was the soil on the mountain a deep red, but also all the plants growing on the mountainside were blood red. In the midst of its green counterparts, the mountain stood out for its color. When Nori saw the mountain, he exclaimed, "This must be the famous Bloody Mountain." Bloody Mountain. Yeah, the name suits the mountain. It is very unique. And it is very unusual too. Zen was also bewildered by the mystery. "It seems that the disciples will face the legendary blooded test," Nori said with a smile. Is there anything unusual about this blooded test? Zen had never heard about the blooded test before, and so he had to ask Nori for more information. Nori was not as well read as Zen, but Nori had a few advantages when it came to information about Cloud Sect. Born in the capital, Nori had been determined to enter Cloud Sect since childhood. Hence, he had collected information and learned about the rules of Cloud Sect from his families and clan. Compared with Zen, who came from a small county, Nori was understandably more familiar with the rules of Cloud Sect and its exams. Since he and Zen were friends, Nori explained to him, the color of this mountain comes from the unique ore it holds. It's called magic red sand. Magic red sand, the ore that is used to make the magic array? Asked Zen. When he heard Nori's explanation, Zen's eyebrows rose in surprise. He had heard of this magic red sand, which was an essential material in illusion refining. When forging mysterious weapons, refiners would add magic red sand, and the weapon would have confusing effects. In addition, this kind of ore was often used in magic arrays and illusion papers. Acknowledging Zen with a nod, Nori added, yes, I heard that the powerful people in Cloud Sect used magic red sand to transform the whole bloody mountain into a large magic array for trial and evaluation. Today, the instructors have brought us here. So, we must be prepared for the blooded test. Nori had heard about the blooded test, but he was unsure about the details. Considering that the magic red sand was used for illusion refinement, the test must be related to unreal illusions. Although all the participants were curious about the test and the mountain, they got no further information from Cloud Sect's mentors. The disciples had been brought to the foot of the mountain, where they were accommodated in rows of houses located there. That evening, everyone rested early in preparation for the next day's blooded test. Early the next morning, the disciples gathered at the foot of the mountain. A long while passed, but they received no orders to go up the mountain. After waiting for several hours, the disciples finally realized why they had not been allowed to go up. They were waiting for other people to join them. In addition to the 1,000 disciples who had passed the initial exam, another group of people would also take part in this blooded test. This group of disciples came from the noble clans. Because of their status, the participants from noble clans did not need to pass the initial exam. They could join the blooded test directly. Compared to ordinary disciples, the disciples from noble clans followed different rules and had special privileges during the test. Hundreds of chariots filled the sky and hid the sun. The flying chariots flew lower from the sky and landed on the ground, neatly parking in front of the mountain. 3 or 4 people accompanied each participant from the noble clan. Masters who radiated a strong aura were among the people accompanying the participants from noble clans. When disciples of noble clans saw the 1,000 ordinary disciples on the ground, their expression conveyed the disdain they had. Considering their families and upbringing, these disciples from noble clans felt superior to the other disciples. After dismounting from the flying chariots, the disciples of noble clans formed a small group, but they did not come near to the ordinary disciples. At this time, the 1,000 ordinary disciples were resentful toward the attitude shown by the disciples from the noble clans. Under normal circumstances, these ordinary disciples would not feel anxious about being asked to wait for several hours. However, they felt that by waiting for the disciples from noble clans to arrive, their time had been wasted. Although they were angry, the ordinary disciples didn't dare to speak out loud. They mumbled few curse words in a low voice. As they had no influential background, the ordinary disciples knew they could not challenge the disciples of noble clans. They did not have the power or resources to afford defending the noble clans. What added to their resentment was the unfair advantage the noble clans had. The disciples from noble clans had access to better training since childhood. They also had the resources to acquire all kinds of magic pills that would refine their bodies and skills. As such, their abilities and power would be higher than those of the ordinary disciples. Now, they were competing against the disciples from noble clans. Provoking the disciples from noble clans would not end well for ordinary disciples. They were afraid that the participants from noble clans would gang up against them and attack them during the test. A murmur rose through the crowd of ordinary disciples when they noticed a small group of disciples from noble clans heading their way. Feeling the anger radiating from this group, the ordinary disciples subconsciously gave way to them. The crowd dispersed on both sides of the disciples from the noble clans. However, one man stood in their way. That man was Zen. He had closed his eyes in order to meditate. Zen had been standing with the ordinary disciples for a long while. When he realized that it was meaningless to wait for more instructions, he decided to conserve his energy and prepare for the test. Ever since he learned that he could penetrate deep into his consciousness, he often maintained a state of meditation and paid no attention to what was happening around him. But suddenly he sensed something different was happening around him. A deafening silence replaced the low-toned gossips and chats. When he opened his eyes, Zen saw a group of well-dressed disciples from noble clans heading in his direction. Unaware of what might have transpired in the time when he was meditating, Zen glanced at the other disciples from the corners of his eyes. Then he noticed that the crowd had split into two, thus allowing the disciples from noble clans to walk straight toward him. Until then, Zen had realized that the group was coming for him. "Hi, what's up?" asked Zen with a smile. He behaved politely. Since he did not know the intention of these people, Zen tried not to offend them until he had a better understanding of their purpose. He knew that it was harder to make friends than it was to make enemies. The group of disciples from the noble clans stopped in front of Zen. A moment later, two men stepped out from the middle of the group. One was Billy, and the other was Perrin, Zen's cousin. On seeing Perrin, Zen narrowed his eyes and gave him a cold look. He withdrew his smile and said in an expressionless voice, "Perrin, are you kidding? Why are you involving so many people in the affairs that only concern you and me?" Perrin sneered. A wicked smile appeared on his face. He was about to say something, but Billy patted Perrin on his shoulder unexpectedly, and said, "Perrin, let me talk to him." Then he sauntered up to Zen and laughed. "I heard that you sent a message for me. I should not interfere in the matter between you and Perrin. Is that correct?" "Yes, that is right. Mr. Wong, the friction between Perrin and I is our family affair. And I do not see why you need to get involved," said Zen calmly. Since Billy was talking to him, Zen decided not to show how angry he was about the interference. Billy looked down and smiled. Then he grasped a butterfly jade pendant in his hand. He toyed with the pendant as he slowly circled Zen and then he said, "I don't agree with you. In fact, I feel it is my business. Do you have a problem with this? It is our family matter. I hope that you will let us solve it between ourselves." Even though Zen wanted to tell Billy that the situation was none of his business, he decided to be diplomatic and indirectly convey his meaning. Zen even went as far as to cup his one hand in the other before his chest to show his respect. It would be best for him if Zen could persuade Billy. He did not want to provoke Billy right before the blooded test. "Haha, I take it that you haven't heard the rumors. I have never been reasonable. If you don't want me to interfere, promise me one thing." Billy raised his head and said. "What thing?" Zen frowned. He did not think that Billy would compromise so easily. "Quit the blooded test, go to the Wong family shop in the south of the city, and buy a knife. Then go to the Wei River Bridge and kill yourself. After you have done all this, I will not get involved in your family affairs," said Billy. His tone was indifferent as though he was talking about a trivial matter. After hearing Billy's words, a flush of red rushed to Zen's cheeks. Anger exploded in his heart. However, a moment later, Zen suddenly burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha, what a funny joke." Zen had sworn to avenge his father's death a long time ago. Even though Billy sent 4 men to beat him during the initial exam, Zen had not retaliated much. One of the reasons was that he did not want to provoke Billy. After all, the Wong clan was a noble clan, and Zen was alone. After everything Zen had done, Billy was still being inconsiderate and meddlesome. To Billy, it must seem as though Zen was a small ant who could be killed easily. Billy had not taken Zen seriously at all. It appeared as though to Billy, Zen was already a dead man and hence, in no position to negotiate with him. Compromise was useless when dealing with such people. The only way to get Billy to back off was to use fists, not words. "Billy Wong, do you think that I'm afraid of you? You want me to quit the blooded test? You want me to kill myself? This is the most ridiculous joke that I have ever heard. I am standing here now. If you think you can take my life, just try. Let me see whether you have the ability to kill me." After saying that, a strong aura burst from Zen's body. Although his face was expressionless, Zen's heart pounded with the anger he felt. Chapter 23. I refuse to accept it. Everyone's attention was drawn to Zen and the astonishing aura he was sending out. Even the large group of noble clan disciples that stood further away looked over with spirited looks. Everyone seemed to pivot their attention toward what was happening automatically. Haha, Billy sucks. He led a group of people against a weak person from the bottom. Shouldn't he know that a cornered dog will jump over the wall in desperation? I guess this boy is building up the strength to fight back, A young noble clansman dressed in white shaking his jade fan whispered. So what? Trust me, you are way overthinking this. Although this boy is in a desperate situation, he's not strong enough to strike back. Moreover, he is just at the organ refining level, and there's no way he could fight someone that much stronger than him. But, then again, Billy really knows how to have fun, to even bother dealing with a guy at the organ refining level. Another noble clansman nodded in agreement with what he heard. The bodyguard, however, standing beside him saluted, glanced at Zen and said, Mr. Huo, you will take part in the blooded test later. You'd better watch out for this young man. Why, what do you mean, watch out for this young man? Tell me what you know. Mr. Huo asked patiently. Mr. Huo knew his bodyguard wouldn't speak up for no reason, and things must be not as simple as they seemed. His bodyguard had spent many years at the nature level and was strong. Besides, he recently safely returned from the cruel Shira battlefield as a master at reading people. Mr. Huo trusted him a lot. The bodyguard continued, I don't know why, exactly, but I have a feeling, even though he is only at organ refining level, he is a very dangerous and mighty opponent. We'd better be careful. Hearing his trusted bodyguard, Mr. Huo raised his eyebrows. He noted with interest, things are getting more interesting. So, Billy will be in a little trouble this time. The relationship of the young men from these noble clans was not unbreakable, and they were not united as one. There were even differences among some noble families. So, Mr. Huo didn't think that he had to warn Billy. Even his bodyguard gave Zen a very high evaluation, and he still believed that for Billy, it was just a small trifle. Billy could handle Zen perfectly fine. As one noble clan was to others, only the disciples from noble clans clearly knew Billy's abilities. On the other side, Perrin and those young noble clansmen all wore long faces. Apparently, Zen's words roused echoes in their hearts. The butterfly jade pendant was deftly spun and turned in between Billy's fingers quietly. His face was calm, but Billy's eyes flashed with an intent to kill. Death to you, in fact, is the most relaxed way to relief. I have a lot of ways to render you pain in a living death. Want to think it over again? I don't need to. My life may be a humble one, but keep in mind, I won't die easily. Snapped Zen sarcastically. What are you waiting for, brother? Cut the garbage. Stop wasting time. Kill him. Unable to stand by waiting any longer, a tall young man rushed out from behind Billy. He raised his fist and brought it down squarely on Zen's head. The young man's strength was at the peak of marrow refining level. A series of runes subtly flowed over both of his fists, which was a strong fist position. As powerful as the punch was, Zen didn't flinch. Instead, he raised his fist to meet the oncoming powerful punch. The people watching shook their heads, thinking that although Zen had determination, he shouldn't have talked the way he did. To beat a master in the marrow refining level with his organ refining level, was like pounding a stone using an egg. Zen fought against a noble clansman. The practicing theories of someone in a noble clan were far greater than Zen's. Such a hard thrust could break Zen's arm. Nori wasn't standing far away. His mouth opened wide, and his eyes were full of worry. Nori knew Zen's strength and that he wasn't as weak as he looked, but he did not see the last scene yesterday. In his mind, even though Zen was not simple, there was no way he could win against a master at the peak of marrow refining level. This time, Zen was in big trouble. But, what everyone presumed, did not happen. The two fists made contact with a loud crack, as flesh and bone made contact with bone and muscle. All they could see was Zen, still standing in the same place, his legs firmly under him on the ground. A warm flow circulated through his body, and offset the strength of the punch that the tall young man sent to him. The tall young man, however, stumbled back several paces, almost falling to the ground, his hand falling to his side, wounded, and his face was flushed. The majority of people did not expect the result and were surprised, and they looked at Zen with a faint touch of admiration. To take on the strength of marrow refining level with the strength of organ refining level, this was not something any ordinary person could do. But Zen did. In particular, watching Zen teach a lesson to a noble clansman, in the presence of over 1,000 grassroots members, left an unspeakable pleasure in their hearts. On the contrary, Billy's people could no longer stay quiet. They shouted as they surrounded Zen intent on attacking him. Zen took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes. If they rushed him, then the only thing he could do was to try harder. He would not wait for his doom, but he would fight. Even if he didn't kill them all, he would take as many as he could before his life ended. At this point, a booming voice was heard, "What the heck are you doing? Today is your blooded test day. You are not here to fight each other." Looking around, they saw 30 chariots headed towards them, and the one who shouted stood on the first flying chariot. Joshua wore ragged overalls and had a squared face. He was the supervisor of the blooded test. Joshua jumped off the flying chariot and strode up to Zen purposely, demanding loudly, "Who was fighting just now?" It was him. He was fighting, Examiner. Accused Perrin as he stepped forward pointing at Zen. "It takes two to fight. Who was the other one?" asked Joshua. "It was me," admitted the tall young man from Wong clan. Joshua nodded and said gravely, "Very well, your eligibility to compete in the blooded test is cancelled." Zen's face paled immediately. It would be unfair if he were disqualified. He was forced to defend himself. "Examiner, I didn't start the fight. I was forced into fighting. Why should I be disqualified from the test? No matter who you are, if you dare to fight here, then you should have the mindfulness that you will be driven out of the Cloud sect, without exception." Joshua did not want to listen to Zen's explanation at all. He asked nothing more before making his decision. The tall young man from Wong clan said, "Supervisor, I am an inner disciple of Cloud sect and not a participant in the blooded test." "Inner disciple?" Joshua asked, "Which peak do you belong to?" "I am from the Skytop Peak, Examiner," responded the tall young man. Master Shu of Skytop Peak is here too. Since you are an inner disciple, the punishment is that 100 points will be deducted from the peak," declared Joshua. There was a smile on the tall young man's face, and he looked relaxed. As everyone knew, 100 points was a lot to the helpless grassroots, but for the noble clan disciples, it was nothing. Such a punishment was meaningless to him. They might have lost 100 points, but Zen would be kicked out of the Cloud sect, which was precisely what they wanted. More than 1,000 students stood there, looking angry about the unjust decision. This punishment was close to no punishment at all. Joshua was helping the influential. At that moment, all 33 peak masters in the Cloud sect arrived on flying chariots. After the students passed the blooded test, each master would pick students who met their requirements. They would choose the right talents for their folds, based on the performances and examination results of the students. To have better development of their respective peaks, each master followed the principles of selecting the best students for their peaks. Of course, Zen understood how bad his situation was. Joshua was obviously on the side of the noble clans. But, he continued to think that he didn't want to miss out on his life for something he had no control over. He argued, "Examiner, I wasn't the one who started the fight. You have to believe me. Everyone here saw it. I was forced into the fight. It's unfair to disqualify me from the competition arbitrarily like this. It's not fair. Now then, tell me, were you fighting?" Joshua had no expression as he asked. "Yes," Zen responded honestly. "He did fight, but he was forced into it. If he hadn't, he would be dead now." "Okay then, we're all set. You don't need to say any more. Just hand over your disciple card. And afterward, leave the Cloud sect," stated Joshua, as he extended his large hand for Zen to hand over his disciple card. Zen took 2 steps back and in a positive tone said, "Examiner, it is unfair to punish me like this. I refuse to accept it, and I think there are more than 1,000 students present who also refuse to accept it." Joshua did not expect a humble temporary disciple would dare to speak to him like that, let alone question him. Who did he think he was talking to? Joshua raged. "How dare you?" Angered, he raised his hand to slap Zen. Although Joshua didn't use any internal strength or skills on his hand, the force alone was enough to severely hurt Zen because Joshua had been at the nature level for many years, and his strength had surpassed the physical limit. One could imagine how destructive his hand was. Facing the possible force of Joshua's hand frightened Zen, even if his body was a mysterious weapon, and would offset some of the power from the examiner, he was not indestructible. The strength of Joshua's hand was beyond what his body could bear. If he were hit, Zen would be seriously injured. But just as Joshua was about to slap him, a clear voice was heard, "Joshua, what do you think you're doing?" Zen and Joshua turned in the direction of the voice and saw a beautiful woman wearing aqua blue standing not far away, looking over at them. Zen remembered her well. He met her after he passed the initial exam yesterday. As angry as Joshua was, at the sight of her, he immediately calmed, and tried keeping an even tone as he explained, "Nothing special, just punishing a disciple for his unruly behavior." To Joshua, the woman in front of them was irritating, and once she caught wind of his failings, he would be in trouble. So, he didn't want to discuss this matter in depth with her, and just hoped this matter would be laid to rest here, silently. The fact of it was though, that Master Su had been watching for a while, and understood the cause and effect very well. She wouldn't care if it was another student Joshua toyed with. Even if she was energetic, she could not go everywhere, minding others' business. But she did care very much that Joshua was about to hit Zen. She would not let that happen. Master Su chose Zen early, because she already regarded Zen as the most prominent among the disciples recruited this year. You dare to touch my student? You will go through me first, thought Master Su. Master Su would not allow Zen to be attacked for his unruly behavior. Which rules did he break? Inquired Master Su. He fought with another disciple here, which is a violation of the Cloud Sect regulations, replied Joshua in a quiet voice. He knew Master Su was here to save Zen and knock him around at the same time. I didn't start a fight with anyone. They attacked me. It's not my fault that I was forced to defend myself, exclaimed Zen, as he seized the opportunity to defend himself. In that instant, Joshua's facial expression changed, and he had the urge to hit Zen. However, Master Su's cold voice from behind Joshua stilled his thoughts as she said, Joshua, as an examiner, you should distinguish between right and wrong. Why didn't you give this student a chance to argue his side? What are you up to? The sharp twinge in Master Su's voice struck Joshua's heart, and it felt far from ideal. Hearing the anger in her voice, Joshua realized he wasn't getting through this matter easily. Smiling complacently, Joshua said, Master Su, it's such a small matter, surely it's not worth getting angry about. Well, if it's a small case, then let him clarify. You, tell all of us. What happened? Asked Master Su. They did it, declared Zen as he pointed to Billy, Perrin, and their followers. They came at me with no reason. One of them rushed at me and hit me, forcing me to fight back. Joshua sneered. Young man, you'd better think over what you are saying. Your accusations are one-sided. Do you have anyone who can prove your tale? Everyone stopped talking at once, and the noisy crowd suddenly became deathly quiet. A light smile spread across Billy's face, while Perrin gloated silently. They knew that the sons of the noble clans would not offend Billy, and among the more than 1,000 disciples from ordinary families, if they were smart, none would stand up for Zen. Just as expected, even though this happened in full view of all of them and they were outraged moments ago, none of them dared step forward and speak out for Zen. Anyone who would stand up for Zen would be a target of Billy's, and who would be stupid enough to risk getting his rear beaten. It made no sense to offend Billy without strength to back it. I can prove it. Chapter 24. Yan Luo. At this time, Nori stepped out of the crowd and said loudly, I saw that the disciples of the noble clans approached Zen and caused trouble. This guy started it first. Even though it was courageous of Nori to step out and speak up, he was very nervous inside. As a native resident of the imperial capital, he was aware of the authority of the noble clans. Even the weakest noble clan had more power than ordinary families. However, Nori didn't hesitate. Seeing Nori speaking up for him, Zen began feeling warm inside. When he thought of how his misfortune almost made Nori fail the initial exam yesterday, Zen felt a little ashamed. He appreciated that Nori was willing to stand by him, even if Nori would offend the Wong clan, when he most needed it. Since Nori had spoken in Zen's defense, other ordinary disciples followed as well. They also hated injustice. Now that Nori had spoken up against the Wong clan, they were willing to help him condemn the haughty Wong clan disciples. Yeah, these noble clan disciples are too unreasonable. Absolutely, they did it first. Yes, we all saw it. All the ordinary disciples began shouting. Hearing their accusations, the faces of Billy and his followers darkened. The tall guy, in particular, stared at Nori, as if ready to swallow the latter. However, since many masters were on the spot, those disciples from noble clans could do nothing. Master Su blinked her eyes and said, in that case, it's clear now. Since they made trouble first, they should be punished. Who knows to which peak the disciple that began the fighting belongs? He is the inner disciple of the Skytop Peak. Joshua did not want to be involved in this matter and replied, I have decided to deduct 100 points as punishment. The Skytop Peak. Master Shu, your inner disciple caused this disturbance and attacked someone. How should he be punished according to the rules? Master Su didn't want the matter to be dismissed easily. And so, she turned to Master Shu and asked loudly. Master Shu stepped out from among the other masters, glanced at his disciples, and said, according to the rules, 1,000 points should be subtracted. Master Shu's words sent shivers coursing through the tall Wang clan disciple. The loss of 100 points was acceptable, but losing 1,000 points mattered to him a lot. Points played a crucial role in Cloud Sect. Both, cultivating and getting handbooks required disciples to have points. However, the opportunity to earn points was limited. At first, a disciple could complete Cloud Sect's tasks to earn points. Now, one could buy points. Earlier, 1 cubic crystal could be exchanged for 1 point, but in recent years, the price of 1 point had increased to 2 cubic crystals. The Wang clan was very huge with many collateral branches. The tall disciple was not part of the core Wang clan. Thus 1,000 points, the equivalent of 2,000 cubic crystals, was definitely a large sum of money for him. Master Su smiled and said, "That sounds fair. Let's follow the rules and subtract 1,000 points." Master Shu nodded, but he sulked inside. He thought, what the heck? Fair, if I don't give this disciple a harsh punishment, you will make trouble for me. I don't have a choice. After dealing with this matter, Master Su approached Zen and said, I believe that your disciple card may have some problems. Could you show it to me please? Zen was doubtful as his disciple card was the same as that of the others. What problem could it have? However, since Master Su had helped him, Zen felt obliged to agree. Moreover, Zen was a little naive. He hadn't thought that villains could be as beautiful as Master Su. Just going by her beauty, he felt that she was perhaps not a bad person. After thinking of this, Zen handed his disciple card to her. Master Su carefully took the disciple card from Zen. Then she fiddled with it before returning it. She smiled at him and said, well, it seems that I made a mistake. There is no problem with your card. Zen was puzzled by Master Su's odd behavior, but he didn't think about it more. Now, the most important thing for him was to get the qualification for the blooded test. Then Joshua, the invigilator, stood in the center of the crowd and announced the conditions of the blooded test. The blooded test is very straightforward. You have to kill the so-called unreal beasts. Every examinee will receive a crystal fragment every time he kills an unreal beast. The whole bloody mountain is divided into 5 areas. Level -1 begins in the outermost area. For killing unreal beasts here, examinees will be awarded green crystal fragments. The next level is on the 2nd floor area. Here, you will face level 2 unreal beasts. Your corresponding rewards for killing them will be yellow crystal fragments. On the 3rd floor, for killing level 3 unreal beasts, examinees will get blue crystal fragments. For killing level 4 unreal beasts, you will get purple crystal fragments, while for level 5 unreal beasts, examinees will get black crystal fragments. Joshua stopped to quickly swallow before continuing. To pass the test, examinees need 100 green crystal fragments, 30 yellow fragments, 10 blue fragments, 3 purple fragments, and 1 black crystal fragment. Zen listened to the instructions attentively. It seemed that killing the outermost unreal beasts was the easiest task as they were just at level -1. However, the requirement was to kill 100 beasts. As for strongest level 5 unreal beasts, examinees only needed to kill 1 to get a black crystal fragment to pass the test. That must mean that a level 5 unreal beast was too powerful for ordinary people to destroy. One more thing, everything that happens on the Bloody Mountain is an illusion. You may get hurt, you may feel pain, and you may also die. However, these are all illusions. If you die, you will be sent down the Bloody Mountain. That means you have lost the test. Keep that in mind. There is only one chance for everyone. Try to do your best. Joshua pointed at the Bloody Mountain and said, now you can go up the mountain. As usual, the disciples of the noble clans go first. The privilege of the noble clans again. This was an unfair rule as the people who went up the mountain first would have advantages over the others. Unfortunately, the rule was made by the leaders of Cloud Sect. As per rumor, there were secret associations among Cloud Sect, the noble clans, and even Burning Sky Palace. Thus the people without a strong background could do nothing. Suddenly a disciple of a noble clan asked, can I take my guards up the mountain? Of course not. Joshua felt a little bitter when he heard the question. If an examinee could take helpers, what was the point of the test? One could just take some masters to help him pass the blooded test easily. Billy turned to 2 members of his clan who would also take part in the blooded test. Tim, Dim, you 2 must remember the faces of those 2 guys. When you get up the mountain, find an opportunity to kick them out of the test. Then Billy glanced around quickly to see if anyone was looking before making a cut-neck-off gesture to them. Tim and Dim nodded and said, "Don't worry. We will make sure that they fail the test." Billy then instructed, "At the key moment, you can use the final killer given by the clan, understand?" "But Billy, I have only one final killer. If I use it, I won't have more." One of them hesitated a little. The Wong clan had trained many skilled, talented craftsmen. Brady Wong, one of the 3 weapon refining masters in the Burning Sky Empire, was a member of the Wong clan. Thus every disciple of the Wong clan had a vital weapon called the Final Killer, which had terrible force. If an owner were faced with a dangerous situation, he could use this weapon to turn the tables. However, each member of the Wong clan only had one Final Killer. This was why Tim and Dim were hesitant to use it to kill Zen. Moreover, in the blooded test, a person could not be killed during the test. One could only be forced to leave the mountain. "Not to worry, I'll help you apply for another Final Killer." Billy belonged to the main branch of the Wong clan. Thus, he had a much higher status than Tim and Dim. It would not be difficult for him to get another Final Killer from his clan. "Billy, you are so kind as to help me with my clan's affairs. I thank you from the bottom of my heart," Perrin said. A faint smile grew on Billy's face as he replied, "Perrin, this is not a big deal. Moreover, you're helping the Wong clan. My brother would like your help to write a few more letters to your sister at Hell Mountain. He needs to win her favor. That's what I'm supposed to do. My sister is too stubborn, which is why this is taking time. And I do believe that as time goes by, she will come around. It will be a blessing for her if she can be married to your brother," Perrin said. It was fortunate that the two were standing far away from Zen. Had Zen heard their talk, he would have punished Perrin. Since Yan Luo had been sent to Perdition Mountain, she was still unaware of what had happened at home. So far, even the news of her father's death had not reached Yan. In the correspondence between Perrin and Yan in recent years, Perrin had been fabricating all kinds of reasons and excuses to pacify her. Now, Perrin wanted to coax Yan into marrying Billy's brother. Chapter 25, Bloody Mountain. After the disciples from the noble clans had gone up the Bloody Mountain, it was the turn of the 1,000 ordinary disciples. They formed a line and entered the mountain one after another. A dozen paths snaked their way into and around the southern region of the Bloody Mountain. Since the paths made it easier to navigate through the mountain, the disciples randomly selected a road and made their way toward their destination. Zen walked at the back of the line in silent contemplation. He was a little nervous and full of doubt. He was not afraid of Billy and the Wong clan, but he could not understand why Billy worked so hard to help Perrin. Yes, Perrin had the resource support of the Luo clan. Compared with the noble clans in the imperial capital, the Luo clan was only a small clan in Sea County. Perrin had nothing to offer Billy in exchange for his help. What the devil are they up to? Zen couldn't understand Billy's motives. While he was walking, Zen was distracted from his thoughts by a colorful band of light on the mountain road ahead. The band of light fluttered erratically, like the entrance to a fairyland. "This is the outermost magic array. We will enter the real blooded test after we go through this ribbon of light," said one ordinary disciple. After saying this, he walked forward. As he neared, the light ribbon enveloped his body. Within a blink of an eye, he had disappeared. Zen stepped into the band of light without hesitation. After doing so, he found that the surrounding scenery had changed. This is the magic array. When he had first arrived at the Bloody Mountain, Zen had been bewildered by the unique color of the mountain. The entire scene was monotonous as even the plants were the same red color. But when he walked into the magic array, Zen found that the scene inside was different. The world suddenly became rich and colorful, including the tall trees on the mountain and the dense growth of small trees and shrubs. He knew that the landscape was a facade that had been created by activating a large phantom array with red magic sand. However, when he reached for the trees and the shrubs, Zen found that their touch and taste were lifelike. After he had taken several steps forward, Zen heard the howling of a beast followed by the sound of fierce fighting. Apparently, someone had encountered an unreal beast not far away. He held his breath and crept toward the woods. When Zen neared the scene, he saw 3 men working together to kill a first-degree phantom wolf. The wolf was not difficult to deal with. Its force and attacks were equivalent to the bone refining level. Since the 3 men had already stepped into the organ refining level, they didn't have any trouble defeating the phantom wolf. When the beast's body fell to the ground, it changed into colorful spots of light that floated up, and slowly disappeared in the air. A green crystal fragment was left on the ground. Haha, this green crystal fragment is mine. One of the three men rushed to grab the fragment. What makes you think that you can take it? I helped kill the beast, too. Another man was determined not to share the fragment. In that case, let's one-on-one. If you win, this fragment will be yours. A moment ago, the three men had worked together to kill the monster. Now, they were disputing over who got to claim the green crystal fragment. Seeing this, Zen shook his head and continued on his way to the depths of the bloody mountain. After a while, Zen felt a little disheartened as he had not encountered a first-degree phantom beast. The phantom beasts living in the first layer of this bloody mountain were the weakest of the monsters. Most disciples could cope with them easily, and so they weren't in a rush to get to the second layer and encounter new risks. As a result, the number of disciples hunting the beasts exceeded the number of targets. As soon as a phantom monster appeared, someone would rush to kill it. The level was so crowded that disciples began fighting each other for green crystal fragments. 100 green crystal fragments were needed to pass the test. The time allowed to complete the test was not enough to accumulate that amount. Zen concluded that it was better to challenge beasts of the second layer than to compete with others here. With a new goal to work toward, Zen headed further into the depths of the bloody mountain. It wasn't long before he entered the second layer of the bloody mountain. Compared to the first layer, there were fewer people in the second layer. The strength of unreal beasts in this layer was equivalent to the organ refining level, which was more suitable for a stronger person to challenge. While walking around, Zen saw a lush forest. Then, he heard a shrill cry from above. He glanced up and saw a monkey hanging from a big tree. The monkey's eyes glowed red, as he stared at Zen. He had seen pictures of such monkeys in books. As a native of the oasis in the western region, this species of monkey was called the main monkey. Zen had not expected that this kind of demon beast could be created in the magic array. Cloud Sect was undoubtedly endowed with abundant talent and resources, including a learned and brilliant magic array master. The main monkey screamed at Zen. Suddenly, the beast sucked in its stomach. Then it took a deep breath, and the stomach blew up like a balloon. In the next instant, its hard mane burst, sending steel-like needles hurtling toward Zen. Zen was quick to react. He sprinted forward, and at the same time, he threw his fist at the tree. With the help of this force, Zen was able to jump 2 feet in the air. As he did, Zen reached for the main monkey. The main monkey was extremely dexterous. It swung around the tree, avoided Zen nimbly, and jumped onto another tree. Seeing that the main monkey was about to escape, Zen decided to chase it. It would be shameful and embarrassing if he couldn't deal with a second-degree unreal beast. He kept following the main monkey as it jumped from tree to tree. The main monkey was not good at attacking. Its primary defense was its hard steel mane. But Zen's body was as hard as a mysterious weapon, and so he could completely ignore the main monkey's attack. The main monkey was so agile that it led Zen around the woods. It was very hard for Zen to catch it. More than once Zen had almost caught the monkey, but the monkey rolled and slipped away again. After a long period of pursuit, Zen decided to try a new tactic. He looked around and studied the trees nearby. Having identified an opportunity, Zen rushed forward, spread out his arms, and hit a tree in front of him with all his might. Fall down. The big, thick tree split in two before collapsing to the ground. A second later, the monkey leapt into the air. It had been aiming for the tree, but since Zen had broken the tree before it could reach it, the main monkey flew straight toward Zen. Zen smiled when his plan worked. The monkey had no way to escape this time. However, as the main monkey approached Zen, it gave out a fierce cry. Then its eyes glowed a deep red before it emitted a squeak. In the next instant, its body turned red, and the mane of the whole body bristled. Zen found the monkey's unusual move. A sense of danger filled Zen. He covered his head with his hands and drew back in horror. Before Zen could retreat 2 steps, the main monkey's body grew twice as large. Pung! The main monkey's body suddenly exploded. The noise was deafening. When the dust settled, Zen saw that the explosion had left a huge hole in the ground. The needles from the monkey's mane were scattered in all directions by the force of the explosion. At the time of its death, the monkey had released its main needles with such force that they were firmly lodged in Zen's body. I didn't expect a second-degree phantom beast to have such a powerful attack, Zen said in surprise as he pulled out the main needles one by one. If he had not stepped back, he could have been hurt by the main needles. The classification of unreal beasts was similar to that of men. The one main difference was that many unreal monsters could burst with incomparable innate power when faced with a survival crisis. After handling the steel needles in his body, Zen approached the pit and found a piece of yellow crystal fragment in the center. Only 30 yellow crystal fragments were needed to pass the test. That was certainly a much smaller number than the green crystals. Of course, the monsters he had to deal with were a lot more fierce. Just as Zen was preparing to put away the crystal fragment, a voice boomed through the forest. "Put that crystal down and get out of here." On hearing the words, Zen frowned. When he turned, Zen saw 3 men standing behind him. Judging by their clothes, Zen knew that these 3 men were disciples from noble clans. It was possible that they might be from the same clan. Only the children from noble clans would dare to rob someone so openly. "I killed this beast, so this crystal fragment belongs to me. Why should I put the piece down?" Zen asked. One of 3 men answered, "Cut the garbage, or you'll suffer the consequences. We are from the Fang clan. Anger our family, and you won't have a chance to regret it." "My brother is right. You can learn lessons from the mistakes of others. All those who did not listen to our family died miserably." Another man said. "Turn in your crystal fragment, or we will kill you." The third man said. Zen held the yellow crystal fragment in his hand. The expression on his face conveyed that Zen didn't have the patience to deal with such arrogance. In fact, all the novelty he had seen after he reached the imperial capital made him feel relaxed and happy, except for the children of the noble clans. Words would fail to describe the attitude of such people. Leaving aside the strength of the children from noble clans, what they had done was so rampant and outrageous that they seemed to look down upon everything in the world. It was perhaps their noble birth and their superior living environment that made them forget that what others feared was not the children, but the power of their family clan. Zen put the crystal fragment in his pocket and prepared to leave. He did not bother to spend more time rationalizing with these men. But the 3 men were determined not to let him go. They rushed forward quickly, encircled Zen, and then they began closing in on him. They thought that since they had all reached the marrow refining level, it would be easy for them to defeat Zen, who was only at the organ refining level. But in Zen's view, they were too slow. It could be seen at a glance that they had been trained from childhood. However, their strength had been increased by pills. They lacked actual combat and practice experience, and hence, their weaknesses were apparent. At this time, Zen stood with his back to the 3 men. As the 3 men pounced on him, Zen took a step back and easily avoided their attack. At the same time, he quickly circled behind them and reached out to grab 2 men by the back of their necks. "Let go of me. If you touch me, my family will kill you. No one has dared to hold me like this. I will never forgive you. I will cut you into 1,000 pieces and watch as you die painfully." The 2 men looked flustered. They hadn't expected their strength to be so weak that they had no power to fight back. However, they did show true characteristics of children from noble clans. Even when caught, they felt they could win by threatening their captor. Zen sneered. He lifted his arms and slammed the 2 men's heads into each other brutally. Bang! The 2 men were killed by the force Zen had used. Like the main monkey Zen had just killed, their bodies turned into spots of light that disappeared slowly. If they had not been in the magic array of the Bloody Mountain, the 2 men would have truly died. Their heads would have broken into pieces with the force Zen had used. Fortunately, they were in the blooded test, in which all participants were a phantom illusion. Hence, these 2 men had not been hurt. Since they had died in the test, a light had enclosed them. Now they would wait for the Cloud Sect's instructors to transport them outside the Bloody Mountain. In any case, they had failed the blooded test. The original intention of the blooded test could be seen here. In the Bloody Mountain, everyone competed with not only the phantom beasts but also with other disciples. And the use of the magic array would effectively avoid real death. Seeing the 2 companions had been taken out, the remaining man took a few steps back in surprise. His expression showed the fear he felt. His rampant and arrogant attitude had been swept away. As soon as the shock wore off, he shouted, "My family! My family!" But Zen didn't let him finish. He growled at the man. "If you don't want to die as well, hand over all the crystal fragments you have. No matter how powerful your family is, they can't save you now." After saying this, Zen took a step toward the man. Without hesitation, the disciple from the Fang clan threw a handful of crystal fragments at Zen. Then he turned and fled without saying anything. Zen shook his head. He didn't want to rob others, but it seemed like recently, many people were trying to rob him. He collected the crystal fragments. There were 20 green crystal fragments and 7 yellow crystal fragments. It looked like the robbery was a quick and convenient way to finish the test. Zen was tempted. Compared to the effort of killing phantom beasts one by one, snatching was obviously more efficient. But he soon gave up the idea. The ultimate purpose of giving the blooded test was to challenge and improve himself. He would never give up the opportunity to refine himself. However, if others tried to rob him, Zen decided not to let them go. Chapter 26. Ryan Fang. Unknown to Zen, someone stood straight-faced outside the bloody mountain, clenching his fists indignantly. Outside the mountain, all the tutors from the Cloud sect were standing next to a picture slab, carefully monitoring the performance of each participant within the bloody mountain. Because they assigned the disciples based on ability and performance. However, according to the rules, disciples who passed the test would be allowed to choose their tutors. These tutors, monitored as early and carefully as possible, so that they had a general assessment of the disciples who participated in the blooded test. Then they made their decisions. They all wanted to find and draw the talents into their folds. Anyone participating in the blooded test received a disciple card. Through the disciple card they carried, the tutors could see where each participant was and what they were doing. At that moment, Dylan Fang was expressionless. Although he was the Dragon Peak tutor, he was also a member of the Fang clan. Fang clan sent 4 clansmen to participate in the blooded test. And Dylan was instructed to ensure that no matter what happened, those 4 were to pass the test. As a matter of fact, the pass rate of the disciples from the noble clans was much higher than any of the disciples that were commoners. Among over 1,000 lowborn disciples, approximately 200 might pass the blooded test. About 170 of the 200 noble clansmen would pass the test. There was always a large gap between the classes because most of the commoners were fearful of the noble clans from birth. They also were fearful of offending the families behind these disciples. With such a low pass rate, although there was a larger group of commoners, most of them would just end up being bit part players. Before the blooded test started, Dylan Fang had returned home once where he patted his chest to make a solemn promise to the whole clan that all 4 family members would pass the blooded test. Nevertheless, 2 of them were just eliminated from the blooded test. Just then, 2 rays of light shot from a spot in the bloody mountain, shooting straight into the sky. Those in charge of the blooded test climbed on flying chariots to retrieve the disciples that were eliminated from the blooded test. Watching on the picture slab, he knew what had just happened. The fellow was becoming quite vicious. He made them crash their heads into each other hard. If not for the magic array, they would have died. They were 2 young members of his family and had bright futures. Dang it, how dare you, exploded Dylan. No common disciple had dared to treat a disciple from a noble clan so rudely in a long time. Generally speaking, if a noble clan child failed the blooded test, it was due to conflicts with another noble group. Sometimes, a noble disciple would fail because he was so cocksure of his talents that he challenged an unreal beast in the 4th or the 5th layer. But rarely were noble disciples washed out in the test by some ordinary disciple. Dylan wanted to know who this commoner was, and make him pay the price for hurting disciples from the Fang clan. He continually manipulated the picture slab, trying to find the young man's information from more than 1,000 participants. And soon enough, he saw what he wanted. The boy's name was Zen Luo. When he switched over to see what Zen was doing, he couldn't see anything. The image on the slab became a blurred, snowy screen. Is the signal bad, or is the picture slab broken? Wondered Dylan as he switched to the picture of another disciple, only to find that everything from that view was normal. He could see everyone's except Zen's. What's going on there? Dylan wasn't the only one encountering this issue. Other tutors were experiencing the same thing. For better research, some tutors constantly switched from one image to another on their picture slabs, to observe each candidate. However, when they turned to Zen's picture, they saw a blurry image. They didn't care much about this incident, thinking like Dylan, that there must be a bad connection. They just shook their heads and switched to the next one. As there were a lot of candidates to watch, it wasn't a big deal to miss 1 or 2. What none of the 33 tutors were aware of was that there was one tutor able to trace Zen, and that was Master Su. She had noticed what other tutors encountered, seeing heads shake and watching them move on to the next candidate. A mischievous grin spread across Master Su's pretty face. She attended the picture slab intently. If anyone was next to her, he would see Zen on the picture slab in front of her, instead of a blurred picture. The reason no one could see Zen's performance but her was that she tampered with Zen's disciple card when she made an excuse to check his card. Only by making sure that no one could watch Zen's performance would no one pay any attention to him. Zen should join her peak. But, now she worried, did the previous battle catch the attention of others? Master Su sighed nervously. Although others could not trace Zen, and could not see Zen's performance, they were able to perceive signs through other participants. She prayed that Zen got enough crystals to pass the test, and she hoped that Zen would not become involved in any more fights. But, then again, those noble clan children were annoying, and always caused trouble. Master Su couldn't help but curl her lips upward in a sly grin. Things didn't always go as Master Su expected. As 2 disciples from Dylan's family were eliminated from the test, his eyes blazed with anger, and he was fuming. Fang clan had sent 4 disciples to participate in the blooded test. 3 were from offshoot branches and were not as strong. However, one of them was Dylan's immediate family and the 3rd son of the family's leader. His name was Ryan Fang, and he was a mighty, talented young man. Dylan gave his word to the clan that all 4 would pass the test. Now, 2 were cut from the ranks. He waited impatiently. He connected to Ryan's disciple card via the picture slab, and without hesitation, he called out, sending his voice over the slab. According to the blooded test rules, this was a violation. However, Dylan didn't care about anything. Ryan, Noah and Peace were eliminated from the blooded test. Someone did that to them. Dylan said in a low but passionate voice over the picture slab to Ryan. What did you say? Who dared to do that to my people? Ryan replied as he ran swiftly on the 3rd layer of the magic array. Behind him, 6 3-grade unreal beasts were chasing him. But he didn't rush in confusion. He didn't frown, and instead, he started chatting with Dylan. It was some guy named Zen Luo. Do you know him? He just doesn't quit. He dared to touch Noah and Peace, stated Dylan, as he ground his teeth. He was so angry because Noah was his nephew, and in his immense family, was the closest to him. Dylan treated him as a son. Comparatively, Ryan was a direct line of descent. But, he was not that close to Dylan or other branches. I know him. Where is he now? Asked Ryan coldly. That was what Dylan wanted. He said smirking, I will give you his location. He is still on the 2nd layer. Although Dylan couldn't see Zen, it was easy to check his location. Alright then, I will kill him after I deal with these imaginary beasts behind me, said Ryan in an unusually bitter voice. In fact, in Ryan's heart, it wasn't a big deal that the stupid cowards from his family were kicked out of the game. It simply meant they were not eligible to enter the Cloud sect. But since these stupid cowards were also members of his family, anyone who dared to cause harm must pay the price. Ryan, the guy is good at fighting, so, if you are not able to beat him down, consider swallowing the mystical pill. Suggested Dylan. Fang clan was well known for refining pills with many famous alchemists in the family. The mystical pill was a pill worth a city. It could raise someone's range to a higher level in a short time, and greatly enhance their strength in a critical moment. However, this pill could only be used if the person was below the nature level, and it was challenging to create. That was why Ryan received just the one. Uncle Dylan, are you doubting me? Asked Ryan in a cold tone. He was the son of the head of the family. Even though Dylan was a tutor at the Cloud sect, his status in the family was nothing compared with Ryan's, and as such, Ryan didn't hold much respect for Dylan. As Ryan finished speaking, he sped up. Dylan watched as Ryan's body flew up to the left and twisted twice in the air as he nimbly clutched a short dagger, pulling a bright blue line from it. As they touched the azure line, the beasts chasing him were all cut in 2, changing first into dimming lights as they slowly dissipated in the air. Soon, Ryan had killed 6 3-grade unreal beasts. Watching from his picture slab, Dylan's heart sank, as he soon realized how wrong he was. Ryan held tremendous power, and he surely had limitless prospects. This was someone he needed to please. So, softening his smile, Dylan said in a flattering manner, "No, that isn't what I meant. Maybe I worry too much. You have superior strength and are unbeatable in Bloody Mountain. I have sent you Zen's location. Check it now." When Dylan was finished, Ryan's expression went blank. He turned and walked in the direction that Dylan directed. At that point, Zen was continuing going deeper into Bloody Mountain, having killed 2 2nd-grade unreal beasts. Able to have a small break from battling, he breathed a sigh of relief. He was exhausted, but, within moments, he heard an unnatural laugh and his face contorted. There, standing in front of him, were 20 disciples from noble clans. They had set up a toll booth, and anyone who wanted to get through was forced to hand over all their Crystal fragments. The first thought came into Zen's mind was, these stupid guys are surely crazy, and it was evident, there wasn't going to be even a small break. Chapter 27. The best way to dispense with fools. The noble clansmen pupils enjoyed many magic pills, learning the best training skills, and there were even some endowed with excellent bloodlines of the family elders. Most of them were born with exceptional advantages over ordinary people. Quite a few of them turned into dandies, living a life of extreme depravity due to their special status. Through magic pills, they cultivated smoothly, but they lacked strength and fighting power. Zen did not think that all the children of the gentry were like this. Otherwise, the noble clans in the imperial capital wouldn't have thrived for as many years. There must be many children among the nobles, who were gifted, diligent and practiced hard. But, obviously, the men he faced now weren't in that league. These guys didn't want to work hard nor did they want to kill the beasts, so, instead, they robbed other participants of their crystal fragments. He was indignant that they wanted something for nothing. How could such shameless people exist in the world? He watched momentarily, noticing that they were robbing the ordinary disciples, not letting them pass, and yet, the noble disciples were left to pass through without saying a word. They were bold enough to rob participants in broad daylight, and the Cloud sect didn't care. Zen didn't actually know if that was true. These guys had been doing this for a while. A few years ago, some disciples from the noble clans discovered this was an ideal location to set up a blockade here, between the second and third level, and collect tolls in the form of crystal fragments from the commoners passing through. It was an easy way to make a fortune, prevent some from gaining admittance, and they successfully passed the blooded test easily. At that time, the Cloud sect turned a blind eye to their behavior for some reason. When the children of the noble clans saw that the Cloud sect had not punished them, they became more unscrupulous. The experience spread among them for several years. Every blooded test since then, there was a group of noble disciples waiting in advance to rob others. The number of unreal beasts on the first and second layers wasn't large, and with so many people fighting, many found it impossible to achieve their goals within the given time frame. So, in order to pass the blooded test, many of them were forced to go up the third level. Now they faced a new dilemma. Before they reached the third level, they were stripped of their crystal fragments by these despicable disciples. Some disciples feared their strength of numbers, while others worried about their influence and high status in the empire. So, most of them chose to hand over their crystal fragments. Zen stood to the side for a while, only to see that even a few strong men succumbed to the bullies. They were angry, but seemingly had no choice but to hand over their pieces of crystal fragments helplessly. Meanwhile, many watched from a distance with hesitation on their faces. They couldn't decide if they should hand over their crystal fragments and head up to the third layer, or back and kill more beasts in the second layer. Of course, not all ordinary disciples were willing to be bullied. As Zen watched from the side, he saw a strong man stride up to pass. The man stood 6.5 feet tall, was as strong as an iron tower, and he carried a great sword. The men from the noble clans saw him and shouted, "Stop!" "What's the matter?" asked the towering man as he stared at them fiercely. "If you want to pass through this way, you need to leave all your crystal fragment pieces behind," stated one of the men. At this, the towering man looked sullen. Glaring at the group of noble disciples, he asked, "Why should I? What's your reasoning? Does the Cloud sect sanction robbery in this manner?" "Haha, why should you? The reason you should is that we are strong in number and more powerful. If you don't hand over your crystal fragments, you don't pass here," stated another man. The towering man was not the sort to give in. His face reddened with anger. Unsheathing his great sword strapped to his back, he held it at the ready as he said, "Bah! You want me to hand over my crystal fragments? That's a pipe dream. If you call me grandpa, I'll consider giving you a reward. My grandchildren, your prize will be death to anyone who tries to stop me." Zen watched from where he stood, not far off, with a smile on his face. The towering man was not weak. This group of noble clansmen finally ran into someone too challenging to intimidate. The towering man swung his great sword and rushed the pass. He was a burly man with big arms, and as he wielded the great sword, the wind roared, whipping the faces of the noble disciples, which caused them discomfort. The men from the noble clans were not strong, or they wouldn't be there robbing others. In the face of the towering man's attacks, the bullies cursed. Unable to resist his attacks, they fell back to each side of the passage, exposing a gap through the middle. Some ordinary disciples who had been hesitant saw the gap and emboldened, took the opportunity to follow the towering man and race through the pass. More and more disciples joined the group when they saw the others succeeding. The checkpoint of the noble clansman was collapsed. The ordinary disciples hurried as a mob at the pass, like fish released from the floodgate. Zen followed the crowd, speeding forward. Seeing what was occurring, the noble clansmen's faces were filled with anger. They didn't expect this at all. They didn't expect to let one man through, let alone so many people along with him. By the time they reacted, quite a few ordinary disciples had slipped through the gate and entered the third level of Bloody Mountain. "Stop them!" cried one of the noble clansmen who was dressed in blue. Seeing the scene, the other noble clansmen knew they wouldn't have anyone to rob if more commoners slipped by. It was worth pointing out that while these noble disciples were not strong, with the weapons and magic tools their families provided, they could still fight. They clustered together quickly to fill the breach and restore their checkpoint. While this was happening, the disciples who were trailing after the towering man continued attacking. The cruel and unrelenting enemies left them only the choice of brave resistance or dropping out of the game. Anyone at this time could burst with increased strength. So the scuffle escalated. "Ah!" wailed a disciple as three noble disciples attacked, leaving him gutted. His enemy stood over him with a bloody long sword that shimmered a brilliant green light. Although each disciple was in the magic array, protecting them from real death, the pain was still real. After screaming, the disciple was immediately encircled in a light, and he was gone. But the noble disciples were not faring well. During the fighting, a noble disciple gently pushed against a commoner to stop him. The ordinary disciple appeared unimpressive but was, in fact, more powerful. The noble clansman felt a strange stab force its way into his body. He began to twitch, tremble, and fell to the ground, dead. Countless dots encased him in light instantly, and he vanished, too. Zen moved with a deft prowess, like lightning during a storm. Many disciples from noble clans tried stopping him. He dodged the attacks easily, weaving between them as he advanced. He managed to shake off the interception, and passed the chaotic checkpoint, nearing safety. The outcome of the battle didn't concern him. He needed the time to accumulate more crystal fragments. As he scanned the scene he had managed to escape, he caught sight of Nori in the crowd. Nori was only at the bone refining level. The best choice for him was to stay and kill phantom beasts on the first level. But he appeared to be caught up in the middle of the scuffle, so he must have wanted to rush to the third layer too. That was beyond Zen's expectation. Fortunately, Nori's strength was relatively weak among the people, and he didn't draw much attention. He was struggling forward. Suddenly, a noble disciple noticed Nori and crept up behind him silently holding a gory dagger. Raising it as he neared Nori, he was about to have that dagger driven into his back. If Nori were stabbed, he would be disqualified. At this critical moment, Zen didn't stop to think. Instead, he quickened his pace, sped, and seized Nori, pulling him to the side. Because of Zen's actions, the noble disciple's sneak attack failed. Nori was oblivious to what happened. When he got his wits, he realized a knife fell to the ground, just behind where he had been standing. He had a look of alarm when he realized what almost happened. He gratefully said, "Zen, I." He stopped short. Zen had no time to talk because the noble disciple was so angry he immediately picked up his dagger and launched himself at Zen. The blade was coming straight at Zen's neck at a deceptive angle, one that was difficult to escape. He wanted to kill Zen with a single blow. "Go to perdition, purple fist strength," yelled Zen as he punched the noble clansman, striking his chest hard, knocking him and his dagger backward to the ground. In the wake of Zen's attack, he felt 7 slight explosions in his body, and 7 substantial bloody holes appeared on his chest. When Zen enhanced his strength, the purple fist strength had improved too. With terrifying destructive power, his attacks dealt fatal physical damage to an enemy's body. Another light appeared, floating around the noble disciple's body. Zen eliminated a child from a noble clan with a single punch. The melee was finally winding down. The disciples that were strong enough had raced past and onto the third layer, while the ones who didn't have time to rush or weren't strong enough were eliminated. Of course, many disciples from noble clans were eliminated during the battle as well. The noble disciples' number went from more than 20 to only a dozen left standing. Half of their people failed the blooded test. Knowing so many had failed to press the noble disciples that remained. Their predecessors used this method to pass the test, and had said robbing crystal fragments in this pass was the easiest way to get into the Cloud sect. Many of them had succeeded in the previous years. So, most of them thought they would pass, even if they lay down to nap during the blooded test. They never expected a single person to rush the barrier, or that so many others would get involved. They lost control of the situation immediately and unexpectedly lost more than 10 people at once. Meanwhile, Zen eliminated a noble disciple. The noble disciples were depressed, and they found no way to vent. Seeing what Zen did, they promptly gathered together to launch an attack on him. Go, one shouted. Watching the noble clansmen surround him, Zen shoved Nori to a safe distance. Kill him. It's so discouraging that my cousin was eliminated. I didn't believe these common men would resist. Kill him. The noble clan disciples were so furious that they lost their reasoning. They raced at Zen, attacking him madly. Half of them were at the organ refining level, and half were at marrow refining level. Every one of them wielded a powerful weapon. Each weapon was above the grade of medium mysterious weapon. Zen remained unflustered in the face of the insanity rushing toward him. He knew if he panicked, there would be more trouble than he had now. His eyes narrowed to slits, and he observed the disciple in blue, secretly selecting him as a target. As soon as the noble disciples began to rush him, Zen ducked in the opposite direction, bypassing the bodies in front and headed past them at the man in blue. Zen noticed they were all following the lead of the man in blue. Taking on the leader first, to defeat his bandit followers, had proved to be the proper strategic choice. So, Zen got him first. Chapter 28. The Top 7 Noble Clans. To be the leader of this group of noble clans disciples, the blue-clad man should be fairly strong. When he saw Zen dared to dart towards him, he grinned contemptuously and changed his attack from the clenching fist to the eagle claw boxing, grappling in Zen's direction while shouting, "Cyan Dragon Claw." "Ha. Do you think you can run away?" The attack seemed very powerful. A pair of hands, like dragon claws, landed on Zen's head. Zen kept calm and quickly leaned sideways to slip out of the attack's grip. Zen rammed the man with his shoulder, making him fall back to the ground. As the clansman was falling backward, Zen moved, and in the blink of an eye, he stood behind him, catching him right before the noble disciple hit the ground. Holding him by the neck with his right hand, Zen shouted, "If anyone dares approach, I'll let him fall, and he'll fail the test." When the other disciples of the noble clans saw Zen gripping the blue-clad man's throat, they stopped. The blue-clad man, Chad, was the intelligent, youngest son of an influential member in the Zug clan. To set up a barrier on the path was his idea. Obviously, he was the bigwig in the group of disciples. At the moment though, Chad was being held by Zen and might be kicked out of the test easily. Consequently, no one dared to make a move. "Hey buddy, if you let me go, I can make sure you get away safely," said Chad calmly, even though he was at Zen's mercy. "Huh, you think I'd believe you?" replied Zen. In fact, with his height and strength, if need be, he could break through the barrier right now, it would just be a little harder. However, every one of these noble clan disciples held a mysterious weapon, and some were top grade. Although Zen's body was as firm as the mysterious weapon, being stabbed would be an unpleasant experience for him. So, this was the safest way. "Tell these guys to leave," ordered Zen. "Do you know, my surname is Zug," stated Chad coldly. There was a clear hierarchy within the noble clans. More than 30 clans were given the title noble clan throughout the imperial capital, but only 7 of them were at the top. Those 7 were the Pei, Zhu, Huang, Yu, Yun, Meng, and Zug clans. The top 7 noble clans were the backbone of the entire empire, and they were the real giants. Chad had a higher status than the members of other noble clans, main branch even though he belonged to the junior side of the Zug clan. That was why Chad had the guts to resist. He believed that if others knew his identity, no one would dare hurt him. Unfortunately for him, he came across Zen. In fact, Zen hesitated a little when he heard Chad's surname. The top 7 noble clans assisted the first emperor setting up the Burning Sky Empire, which meant their history was as long as that of the empire. Even a lower noble clan was too large for Zen to go up against, but he would not yield easily. "Yes, I know your clan, but I'm sorry, I have to pass the blooded test. Tell them to move aside, or you'll be kicked out," Zen said, grasping him more firmly. Chad's face flushed with anger. He treated joining the blooded test like a game. He didn't think anyone would dare provoke him. Chad thought Zen's behavior was an insult to him, instantly feeling furious. Everything about the blooded test was an illusion. So what if he failed today? He could still take part in it next month. So, in spite of Zen's hand firmly grasping his neck, Chad was going to fight back. As soon as Chad moved, Zen gently twisted his hand, and with a cross CK, Chad's neck snapped. Before Chad breathed his last breath, Zen lifted him higher and threw his body at the remaining noble clan disciples. The disciples were surprised at Zen's decisiveness. While seeing Chad's body on the ground in front of them and gradually fading into spots of light, they knew that Chad had failed the test. While the disciples were in a trance, Zen broke through their blockade, lunging towards the third layer of the mountain. The disciples recovered their wits and chased Zen, each wielding their mysterious weapons. At the same time, outside the bloody mountain, all of the examiners burst into cheers. Awesome! This boy has great composure in the face of difficult situations. Cool. Ha, what a cunning kid. All of the examiners' attention had been focused on the battlefield. At first, they all paid attention to the towering man who swung the great sword to break through the barrier. However, after the man succeeded, Zen returned to save one of them. Zen kicked a noble clan disciple out of the test by one punch, caught Chad before the rest could surround him, resolutely killed him, and then escaped while Chad's exit distracted the rest of the disciples. The series of Zen's actions drew the attention of all the examiners. They quickly queried Zen's information, while trying to switch to Zen's images on the picture slab. That was when they discovered that the images of Zen were blurred, making them unable to watch. "What's the matter?" yelled a foul-tempered examiner who glared at Joshua, the one in charge of the blooded test. It wasn't easy to find a disciple with good potential, so these examiners were eager to know more about Zen. "Joshua, why can't we see the images of this kid? What's wrong with the picture slab?" entreated several masters. After Zen ran off, they were unable to see his figure anymore. Before the blooded test, the disciple cards and the magic arrays on the bloody mountain all had been checked carefully. Over the past few decades, he had not seen such a problem yet. How did it happen now? Watching the scene on the picture slab, he found that only the boy's images were blurred, which led Joshua to believe it was a problem with the kid's disciple card. Wait. A thought struck Joshua. Before the boy set off, Master Su checked his disciple card. Joshua thought he had figured out the reason. Master Su must have done something with the kid's disciple card. The moment Joshua opened his mouth to say something, he felt a chill shoot up his spine, freezing him. He snapped his neck around and saw Master Su staring coldly at him. If looks could kill, the dagger-like glare Master Su shot him would have killed him on the spot if he uttered a single word. Joshua swallowed hard, letting his words slip back down his throat at the same time. Master Su had a frosty look. She wasn't worried about Joshua telling anyone about what she did to Zen's disciple card. She just couldn't believe that Zen went back to save anyone. Zen couldn't break through the barrier easily just for saving one of them. However, now all of the examiners had seen his incredible performance. Master Su knew that they would compete fiercely against her for Zen, whatever her high, special social status. Watching Zen's agile form sprinting from the picture slab, Master Su shook her head, grudgingly. She just wanted to recruit the boy quietly, but the kid's remarkable performance was making it complicated. She clenched her teeth and whispered, "Humph, you little rascal, I'll make you experience a hard period when you get to Drizzle Peak." Chapter 29, Compelled to Fight. In a single breath, Zen sprinted a few hundred feet, where he saw a colorful light strip hovering in front of him. Thinking it might be the entrance to the third layer, he investigated, and sure enough, it was. He plunged headlong into the light, disappearing. Passing through the band of light was like walking into a different world. The scene in front of him differed from the second layer. The lush trees were replaced. Instead, there were bare hillsides and stone forest composed of jagged rocks. Caves at least 10 feet deep dotted the slopes, and black noxious smoke rose from the openings. It looked like a sad and lifeless sight. The disciples who passed through the band earlier were not in sight at the moment. He tried to figure out where Nori was, but Zen appeared to be off. Nori's trail. Where on earth has Nori gone? Maybe he found somewhere safe after he got to the third layer because disciples from the noble clans might come looking for him. "Hope you are safe now, my brother," thought Zen, sincerely praying for Nori's safety as he began to make his way through the third layer. After making his way up a hillside, Zen stepped into the jagged rocky forest. The crystal fragments he had in hand were far from being enough to pass the blooded test, so he hurried on his way. He needed to get enough crystal fragments as soon as possible, as this wasn't a safe place to remain. Unreal beasts on the third layer were all higher level and therefore more challenging to fight. Generally speaking, the strength of the 3 grade beasts, was comparable to that of a person at the marrow refining level. And since the unreal beasts were transformed from evil creatures, they were even stronger. Animals of the same level were generally more powerful than their human counterparts. For that reason alone, Zen knew that he needed to be vigilant. He looked around warily, continuously as he walked through the forest. He had taken only 2 steps, and he heard a sound. The hairs along his arm and scalp tingled when he listened to the hissing of a snake. The hairs on his neck stood up, alerting him that something was following him. Zen whipped his head around toward the strange hissing sound, scanning every inch very carefully, only to find that nothing but the jagged rocks were there. Everything was perfectly still. Full of doubt, Zen wrinkled his brow, making a face while wondering, was that an illusion, or am I just jittery? After listening for a little while, remaining perfectly still, he sighed in relief. Then he continued to move forward through the forest. However, as he was passing under a stone arch formed by some jagged rocks, a shadow fell, cast from the other end of the arch, heading straight at him. Thankfully, Zen had been extremely vigilant, making his reaction time notably fast at the sight of the shadow. Leaning back, he pressed himself close to the ground, allowing him to nimbly elude the shadow, while at the same time, he rolled sideways, and narrowly avoided being whipped by the snake as it dropped, thrashing its body where Zen had been a second earlier. Zen tilted his head slightly, peering at a deep groove that was cut into the spot where he had been a second prior. When Zen had the chance, he clambered to his feet and found a 3-grade beast blocking his path. It was a giant boa. Missing him on its first go, the gigantic boa slithered out of reach, scuttled into the surrounding stone forest. The boa looked around savagely with its massive, mesmerizing eyes, and its bright red tongue lashing out, flicking the air periodically to taste where Zen was. Zen didn't dare take the creature lightly. He took a few steps back, leaning against a stone so that the boa couldn't take him from behind. Then stared at the boa. As long as it attacked him from the front, he was confident he could deal a death blow. Unexpectedly, the cunning boa snaked around the stone forest, occasionally popping its massive head and flicking its tongue at Zen, only to vanish again, just as quickly as it appeared. Zen kept to his back pinned to the stone, motionlessly watching, unwilling to fall for the ploy of being lured away no matter how hard the snake tried. The boa moved fast. If Zen followed it, he would end up with nothing. Although the beasts were all transformed from evil creatures, their most significant shortcoming was that they were not patient like the humans hunting them. So, Zen patiently kept careful watch of the boa's movements. In the stone forest, a meeting between a person and a boa seemed inevitable. Yet an hour later, the encounter was still a cat-and-mouse game. Finally, Zen's patience paid off, as the boa launched at him. The boa slithered behind Zen and raised its tail, preparing to strike. Since Zen's back was against the stone, the crafty serpent let loose enough of its muscular body to coil itself around the rock and Zen with it. Controlling the energy flowing through him, Zen focused and suddenly, a purple aura burst from within his body. Unsure if it would flee or try to crush him in retaliation, Zen knew he had only this one chance, and if he couldn't annihilate it in that first strike, the prize would be lost. So, he was determined not to give it a chance. With a plan in mind, Zen offered no resistance, allowing the beast to entwine itself around the rock along with his body slowly. Soon he was lifted into the air. The stone behind him was quickly crushed under the strength of the boa's enormous body. Gravel and dust dropped to the ground. At the same time, the hold the boa had on Zen tightened until he was firmly enshrouded in the vice-like grip. Zen knew the habits of constrictors. After they wrapped their prey, they would slither and slowly tighten themselves with each breath, feeling the heartbeat slow, and heat coming off their victim. They would not stop until their prey ceased breathing. The prey suffocated slowly, bones grinding as they did. Then the snake would release the victim, unhinging their large jaw to swallow the food whole. Before the boa constricted against him, Zen inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with air and closed his eyes. Inwardly, he focused on his limbs, drawing strength, and waited for a while. To the boa, he appeared to be a weak, defenseless being now. Suddenly, gathering all his vigor, he snapped the back of the beast. Crack! The boa's colossal body was snapped into several pieces. The pieces scattered, falling onto what remained of the rock. The snake's eyes grew large with a horrified look. From deep in its memories, the boa knew that once wrapped within its coil, it was impossible for a prey to escape. And shortly after that, the boa had a meal. The constrictor thought it would be happily digesting now. Instead, the strength of the prey it had chosen was so sudden, that the boa was unable to endure. And it was instantly torn in several pieces with no time to react. 5 pieces wriggled on the ground before transforming into small bits of light, and finally, disappearing. Zen slaughtered the boa constrictor. Ping, ting, came a sound as the snake faded. Following the sound, Zen saw a purple fragment fall from the jagged rock, clinking to the ground. After the battle he just survived, the fragment's fall was crisp and sweet to Zen's ears. Now, he only needed 9 more purple fragments to pass the blooded test, making him realize that the 3rd layer was a better place to hunt. Zen picked up the purple fragment, wiping it clean with his sleeve, before tucking it safely in his pocket with the other pieces he'd collected so far. He looked to his right and jogged ahead in a hurry to earn more fragments. Estimating that up on the 4th layer the creatures would be equal to someone half step into the nature level, and animals being what they were, the beasts would be stronger than that even. Thus, he had no intentions of going up there. Knowing that he would only need to kill 3 beasts at level 4 to pass the blooded test did tempt Zen. However, recalling the strength Evil Lan exerted even when physically exhausted, and that these were half step into the nature level 4 beasts, he dismissed the idea of going up there. The fact was that Zen's assessment was extremely accurate. For the blooded test, most people remained on the 3rd layer. Very few disciples braved the 4th or 5th layer. The reasoning was simple: the initiates were not at the higher levels, which meant the beasts were too strong, and those participants would probably lose their lives before earning a single fragment. That was not a place the disciples wanted to be. After deciding, Zen spent 6 hours wandering around on the 3rd layer. During that time, he harvested quite a few fragments. First, he came across a demon crow that attacked him from the air, leaving Zen no way to avoid its attacks. When he tried attacking the demon crow, it would deliberately put distance between itself and Zen, making Zen raise his brow and shrug his shoulders. As he scoured his mind for some way to deal with this demon crow, an idea popped into Zen's head. Falling to the ground abruptly, Zen pretended to be dead. He wasn't sure, but he believed the demon crow was a scavenger that would enjoy feasting on a carcass. The minute the crow saw Zen sprawled on the ground, it believed Zen was dead and swooped down to feast. But, as soon as it was close enough, Zen punched it. The demon crow fell dead from the one punch Zen delivered. Later, he met up with a tremendous ancient mammoth. Its monstrous frame was intimidating, the power it possessed was more so, and could lead to trouble for Zen. However, Zen wasn't afraid at all and relied on his instincts. Zen dispatched it quickly. And after that, he met 3 black wolves, a sky dragon, and even a colossal gorilla. In general, the beasts were much more extensive and stronger on that level than they were on the 2nd layer. For Zen, it took a little bit longer to deal with them, because while the beasts were strong, they weren't as smart as him. With a bit of creativity, it wasn't difficult to slay them. Over the 6 hours, he won a total of 8 purple fragments from his victories and needed only 1 more to pass the blooded test. While he was thinking that, a bloody porcupine appeared in front of him. Fury flashed in its savage eyes, while it drooled from out the corners of its mouth near protruding hideous tusks. In desperation, it surged at Zen, attacking. Deadly quills covered the bloody porcupine completely. If a person was pierced by one of the quills, the poison would kill him. Worse yet, its skin was so thick and rough on the beast that it made killing it a formidable trial. In a short time, very few chances to kill it arose. Fortunately, it lacked intelligence. In spite of the brute force approach to attack, Zen not working, it was unable to change how it engaged Zen. Time and time again, it charged Zen but didn't even make contact with his clothes, let alone hurt him. Zen agilely dodged each attack and devised a plan to wait for the creature to drain itself of virtually all its energy, then Zen would give it a death blow. Dodging the porcupine's charge, Zen was barely on his feet when suddenly he felt the sensation that danger was nearby and cursed under his breath, "Dang it." Instinctively, he rolled to one side. As he turned, Zen saw a long, shiny blue thread appear where he had been. Reacting slowly, the bloody porcupine ran headlong into the thread and was instantly sliced in half. It happened so fast, the creature didn't have time even to scream. Its eyes echoed its final seconds of life, glazed, wide orbs full of fear and panic. As with all the other creatures, light filled the beast before it faded, leaving behind a sizzling purple shard where the creature had fallen. Zen's face paled as he stared at the gradually disappearing long blue thread, thinking, wow. That thread is sharp. If I'd been slower, I would have been sliced into 2 by it. Take the fragment, it's yours, Zen heard a cold voice tell him. Looking in the direction it came from, Zen saw a young man standing close by. He was casually playing with a delicate-looking dagger that had a long bright blue thread that kept coming out of the tip. This young man and his dagger were the reason the bloody porcupine was cut in two. "Who are you?" asked Zen. Since it was clear that the young man was there for Zen, he remained vigilant. The young man did not lift his eyes from his dagger as he played with it, as he responded in a casual tone, "Me. My name is Ryan, and I am part of the Fang clan." An idea flickered briefly in Zen's gaze, as soon as he told Zen his family affiliation. Zen soon understood what this man was here for. Ryan was another son of the Fang clan like the ones who attacked him without reasons back on the second layer. He met 3 members on the second layer. But apparently, he was stronger than they were. Zen realized Ryan did not have friendly intentions. Raising a brow, Ryan took a handful of purple shards from his pocket and sent them tumbling to the ground. The pinging as they hit the surface sounded like shattered jade dropping, making a crisp sound as they did. Whatever Ryan's purpose was, the music that those shards made as they landed was extraordinarily beautiful. To ensure passing the blooded test, a disciple needed 10 pieces. Scattered here were dozens of purple fragments. A small group of pupils could pass the test with this many. It shocked Zen to see how many purple shards Ryan had collected. To accrue as many as he did, Zen spent hours fighting beasts, but he only gathered 9. And yet, this guy had several times more than Zen. Ryan had dozens. "Fight me and, if you beat me, you can have all these purple fragments." "How about it?" Ryan asked dispassionately. There was no such thing as free in life, and Zen knew those shards would cost him if he agreed. Shaking his head firmly, "No, I don't think that's a good idea." "I'll see you later," said Zen as he turned to leave. He was sure this fellow was not trying to befriend him. With the final purple fragment, Zen could finish the test. Why would he want to fight this guy? He would much rather fight a beast. To collect so many purple fragments in such a short period, this guy was definitely tough. As for the dagger in his hand, Zen could see it was a dangerous weapon. The wheels were spinning in Zen's head. If he were to guess, Zen would have to say that the dagger was very likely a spiritual level of treasure. After being in so many fights, Zen was confident in his strength, but he wasn't blind. Smiling faintly, Ryan stated, "I'm afraid you don't have a choice in the matter. You see, while I'm not surprised that the 3 stupid cowards were eliminated, I take pity on them at the same time. To keep it fair, you should pay the price for getting people from the Fang clan kicked from the test. Don't you agree?" Hearing what Ryan was telling him, Zen stood still, ready to leave. Just as he'd suspected, Ryan was looking to cause trouble. Before he could go, a glowing blue thread suddenly appeared in front of him. As the silk thread quickly grew, it became a small square. Zen watched, as the square increased rapidly in size until eventually it became a vast net that could cover hundreds of feet around them and encompassed Zen and Ryan inside. "Don't you think that the blooded test is exceptionally dull? I mean, come on, we're dealing with beasts that have no intelligence. It's simply insulting to me. We should add something interesting. Only a real fight, perhaps, can cheer me up. Then, maybe I'll leave you whole," said Ryan, while he laughed maniacally. Narrowing his eyes, Zen glared at Ryan standing not far away. It would seem that Ryan wasn't willing to let him go until they fought. He sighed, shrugging his shoulders in reluctant acceptance. Chapter 30. Fight Tooth and Nail. At that time, the masters were waiting outside Bloody Mountain. They had all locked onto Ryan through their picture slabs. Ryan had shown the most potential in the blooded test, but most masters had lost interest in him. While it was true that the masters used the test to hunt for potential disciples, they had their reasons for not focusing on Ryan. Firstly, although Ryan was the strongest candidate in this blooded test, the masters believed that he would want to join Dragon Peak because his relative, Master Fang, was the head of Dragon Peak. If Ryan had no intention of considering other peaks, then the masters would not waste their time trying to recruit him as a disciple. Zen was another reason that drove the masters' attention away from Ryan. The masters had been watching the examinees who had entered the second and third layers of the blooded test. They had seen Zen on their picture slabs, and his abilities had caught their attention. They had been watching Nori for a long time since Zen had saved him. Although disciples from noble clans had surrounded Zen, he still risked himself to save Nori. Since Zen and Nori seemed to be friends, the masters thought they would stay together. However, to their great disappointment, they failed to find Zen. Zen didn't seek out Nori in the next layer. The masters assumed that Zen might like fighting alone and dislike having contact with others. Perhaps Zen was a man who preferred coming and going freely. After a long while, when no master had been able to find Zen on their picture slabs, one master switched to Ryan. That was when he noticed the fight beginning between Ryan and Zen. Once he had alerted the other masters, excitement surged through them. They all shifted their picture slabs to Ryan right away. Given the potential of both Ryan and Zen, the masters knew that a great fight lay ahead. Adding to the excitement were the odds that were now in Ryan's favor since he had cast a large net entrapping himself and Zen inside. Ryan had been the most promising candidate during the test. But Zen was an unexpected successful entrant. Ryan's choice for which peak he would join was obvious and settled, however, Zen was different since he came from a low-level clan. He had no one to depend on. Since he was a person of extraordinary ability, all the masters intended to secure him as their disciple and cultivate him with all their strength to create a bright future for their peaks. Seeing the battle between Ryan and Zen, the interest of all masters was aroused. "Who do you think will win?" one master whispered to the master next to him. "I think Ryan will win," the master answered. "Why?" "Look at the weapon in Ryan's hand. Don't you know that dagger? It's called the cut-all-like-air dagger. The energy filaments emitted by this spiritual weapon were capable of destroying anything, no matter how strong. Zen would be knocked out of the blooded test as soon as the energy filaments cut him." Before long, all the masters were debating about the odds of the fight between Ryan and Zen. Some supported Ryan, while some thought Zen would win. They could not reach a consensus. Only one master remained silent. Master Su was very upset. She sulked like a little girl who had hidden a toy of great interest to her from others but had lost it before she found the chance to take it home on the sly. Her expression conveyed her disappointment and anxiety. Zen stared at Ryan, who was standing across from him. He gathered his strength and enveloped his body in an eerie iridescent purple light. At this time, Ryan was one of the strongest enemies he had ever encountered. Zen knew that this was just the beginning. He would face many enemies on his path, and they would be stronger than Ryan. Although Ryan was at the marrow refining level, he put great pressure on Zen. While many children idled away their time, many children from noble clans cultivated hard and possessed incredibly powerful strength. They had access to the best resources in the world. If they could cultivate hard, they would make rapid progress and gain higher combat effectiveness than cultivators from ordinary families at the same level. Zen circled Ryan. After circling Ryan twice, neither Zen nor Ryan had attacked. Ryan started his attack on Zen when Zen circled him for the third time. With a malicious smile on his face, Ryan pulled a bright blue filament from the dagger in his hand and then threw the filament at Zen. Under normal conditions, Ryan looked gentle and quiet. However, he was in a frenzied state when he was fighting with others. It seemed that mutilating his opponent was the only way to calm Ryan. Zen jumped up without hesitation and rolled back to avoid the bright blue filament, but he was a little slow. The bright blue filament flew past his forehead and cut off some of his hair. This narrow escape shocked Zen. He felt ashamed at not being able to dodge the attack completely. Zen gulped when he realized that had he been any slower, the filament would have sliced his head off. Ryan gave Zen no time to catch his breath. He rotated the dagger in his hand and generated many chaotic bright blue filaments in a minute. Then he ran toward Zen with the intention of slamming Zen with the bright filaments. The treacherous filaments would cut Zen into pieces, and he would die a tragic death if Ryan were to succeed. At the moment, Zen had no other choice but to run. Zen could not attack Ryan when the filaments surrounded him. Running straight at the person holding the filaments would increase Zen's odds of being shredded. Zen needed another plan. The day had not turned out the way Zen had expected. The test had been going well. After all, Zen had enough crystal shards to pass the blooded test. But now when he was so close to success, he did not expect anything like this to happen. What could he do? With no other alternatives, Zen smiled bitterly. The large net covered Ryan and Zen. The net encompassed hundreds of feet, but there was little space for Zen to dodge. Since Ryan was relentless in his attacks, Zen had no choice but to retreat several steps. At last, Zen was cornered. There was nowhere left for him to go. Ryan realized Zen's predicament, and a big, cynical grin grew on his handsome face. His eyes narrowed as he studied his target. Ryan knew that Zen had potential. His combat experience and his skills had given Ryan a challenge. Although Zen had come from a low-level clan, he had a strong mind and excellent cultivation abilities. However, Zen had sealed his fate when he dared to offend the Fang clan. Killing him during the blooded test and ensuring that Zen could no longer attain his dream, which had been spun by faith, willpower, and endeavor, were very alluring for Ryan. It made the blooded test more interesting. Zen stood in the corner. The filament net was behind him. If he took even one small step backward, the net would cut him into small pieces. He would die right away. Ryan stalked toward Zen. A thick layer of chaotic filaments writhed in his hand. For Zen, this seemed like the end. Alas, will I lose this time? Zen did not want to lose. He could retake the blooded test and join Cloud Sect next month. But he had worked hard and thought that he deserved this win. Every time Zen thought of Yan and her predicament, he felt pressed for time. She was trapped in Hell Mountain, and he had no idea what had happened to her. Equally, Yan had no clue what was happening in their clan. A small voice inside Zen kept urging him forward. Don't waste time. Hurry up. You have to save Yan as soon as possible, were the thoughts that drove Zen to accomplish his goals. The filaments are lethal, and I am trapped. What can I do? My bones withstood Evil Land's attacks. Perhaps they are strong enough to resist damage from the filaments. In his moment of despair, Zen stumbled on a risky but brilliant idea. He decided to roll the dice. He put one of his hands behind his back and touched the net with one finger. The moment his finger touched the net, Zen felt a sharp pain. He knew that the filaments had cut through the skin of his finger. In spite of the agonizing pain, he pushed his finger a little further. It was time to test his theory. The bones of his finger successfully stopped the filaments. Aha, my bones can resist the damage of the filaments. Zen was thrilled. He cast a sideways glance at his finger and found a shallow scar on the bone. The filaments had also hurt his finger bones, however, the filaments had been unable to cut through. His bones could resist the cutting force of the filaments. Well, let me fight tooth and nail. I am in the magic array. No hurt I get is real. Even if I risk my life, I will not die for real. The worst thing that can happen is that I will be removed from the test. It is not such a big deal. Zen was determined not to let Ryan get his way without a proper fight. Now that he knew that his body could handle the filaments' cutting force, Zen planned to surprise Ryan. He waited quietly as Ryan approached him, step by step. When Ryan was just one step away from him, Zen raised his arms to protect his face and pounced on Ryan. Ryan was stunned. He knew how dreadful the cutting force of the filaments could be, and so his first thought was that Zen was out of his mind. However, Ryan soon regained his composure. How dare Zen pounce on the filaments like this? Doesn't he know that he would be cut into small pieces by the filaments? Is he surrendering so hopelessly? At that moment, not just Ryan, but also the masters paying close attention to the fight thought so. It seemed to them Zen would be knocked out of the blooded test. Zen's decision did not change how the masters felt about his potential. A strong warrior would not be crippled by defeat. Instead, he could stage a comeback in the next test. Joining Cloud Sect should not be too hard for Zen. The masters had thought of everything. They had planned to find out where Zen lived as they intended to visit him after the blooded test. Regardless of the result of the test, they wanted to show some kindness to him. Finding a disciple like him was rare. All the masters stared at their picture slabs when Zen pounced on Ryan. Zen felt the filaments cut into the skin on his arms and legs. As the filaments worked their way through his flesh, tissue, and muscle, the pain became unbearable. Zen gritted his teeth and pushed forward. There was no option for retreat. At last, the filaments stopped when they reached the bones and failed to cut through. As expected, his bones could resist the cutting force of the filaments. Ryan thought Zen would be cut into small pieces by the filaments, but to his surprise, Zen was wounded but not shredded. Startled, Ryan stared at Zen. Taking advantage of this situation, Zen punched him in the face. The force used by Zen was so strong that Ryan's pretty face was badly mutilated with the first blow. Even so, Zen still managed to catch the shock reflecting in Ryan's eyes. Ryan was known as the elite among the disciples from noble clans, and he deserved the title. In spite of slow response, he twisted his body, roared, and tried to stab Zen in the abdomen with the dagger. But Zen had foreseen the attack. He quickly seized Ryan's arm and hit Ryan with his elbow. Ryan returned the attack with his other hand. They were locked in a dogfight. Over and over, both of them rolled on the ground, like two children fighting. The difference was that their attacks were intended to kill the opponent on the spot. The two men didn't follow any particular movements nor techniques of martial arts during the fight. They simply followed bodily resistance to attack. Who could be better than Zen in bodily resistance to attack? Slowly, as time went by, Ryan became weaker and weaker. His body could barely resist Zen's attacks. Zen closed his eyes for a brief moment and called forth the eerie purple light. Then before Ryan realized what was happening, Zen punched Ryan 3 times. Each fist carried the full force of the purple fist strength. Muffled sounds came from Ryan's body. Since Zen could manage 7 damages with each blow of the purple fist strength, 21 lesions could be worked on Ryan's body. Ryan could not help but writhe in pain. Panic overwhelmed him as Ryan realized that he had lost. Seconds later, bright light spots enclosed Ryan, and he disappeared from the bloody mountain. Although he had lost, Ryan couldn't help wondering what Zen's body was made of and why his dagger and the filaments had failed to cut him into pieces. Now the fight was over, and they had a winner. Obviously, Ryan was out. Chapter 31, Ogre. Outside Bloody Mountain, the masters exchanged wide-eyed looks of disbelief and gasped in surprise. Being a master at Cloud Sect meant being well-informed, composed and mature. And through the years, they had seen all kinds of talents. Quite frankly, some of the most talented warriors were trained by them. Accordingly, they should not be so surprised. But these masters could not help shouting excitedly. Why was that? Each of the masters had a distinct perception of the rare skills and strength Ryan possessed, and also, they knew the might of Ryan's dagger. The average people might not know, but the masters did. Those energy threads were extremely sharp, and could easily slice a low-grade spiritual weapon in 2. Even a middle-grade spiritual weapon would probably be cut into pieces. To withstand those silk threads, a top-grade spiritual weapon was needed. But what occurred just now was so strange. Everyone, including Ryan, was shocked. It was a huge surprise when Zen withstood the silk threads with his flesh. Everyone watching had believed this to be Zen's final stand before he was out of the blooded test. In their eyes, his struggle was in vain. Zen didn't stand a chance of winning against Ryan and his spiritual weapon. The only foreseeable outcome of Zen crashing into the threads was him being shredded. Much to the onlookers' surprise and Ryan's astonishment, Zen not only shattered the silk threads but also outmaneuvered Ryan in the blink of an eye. It was no wonder that the crowd was surprised. What was the body of this kid made from? How did he develop iron-like flesh? His strength was comparable to a top-grade mysterious weapon. The expressions on the masters' faces were astonishment, while in the heart of each was the idea of bringing him under their folds. Unlike the other masters, Dylan Fang had a bitter taste in his mouth, and hatred filled his eyes. He stared at the picture slab. It never struck him that Ryan could be eliminated because he was the most talented refiner in the Fang clan. This time, his family sent 4 pupils to participate in the blooded test. But unexpectedly, 3 of them failed. He was afraid that it was difficult for the remaining 1 to pass the blooded test. Sadly, the one being kicked earlier was the young master and part of the main branch of the family. He sighed, knowing a scolding would be waiting for him next time he returned to the Fang clan. As it was not difficult for people from the Fang clan to be admitted to the Cloud Sect since their family was influential in pills refining, none of them would have imagined all 4 would fail the blooded test. This was shameful and bitterly humiliating to the whole clan, and no doubly so for him. Zen Luo, spat Dylan through clenching teeth bitterly. The name was burned into his mind. He would never forget the humiliation brought on his clan by that kid. There were a vast number of talents at the Cloud Sect. Many of them died for many reasons. Dylan wanted to see how Zen would end. HMPH, he snorted. When the fight ended, the masters were excited to watch another battle and tried to watch Zen, only to discover that he disappeared without a trace from the picture slab. Earlier, none of them cared much about the bad connection that prevented them from tracking Zen. But after the battle with Ryan, it was evident that he was a wonder to watch. Now, with Ryan out of the test, Zen's picture was all blurred again. Jumping up angrily, the masters looked for an outlet to vent their frustrations, and blamed Joshua. Being scolded so harshly left Joshua frowning and feeling down. He wanted to explain himself, but when he thought of the horrifying rumors about Master Su, he decided to swallow the bitter pill. He didn't dare upset her. Feeling resentment, Joshua was unsatisfied with nowhere for him to complain, and nothing to do but keep silent. Dang, such bad luck. But who is to blame? This is all that initiates Zen's fault, thought Joshua, shifting the blame. Finally, he had a place to lay the blame. He dared give me a hard time. We'll just see about that. At their first meeting, Joshua knew Zen would be trouble. Here was this commonly born disciple who dared to oppose him, causing Master Su to criticize him, and now the instructors were scolding. How could he settle for this? He was silent, but what no one saw was how full of hatred his eyes were as he contemplated how he could get revenge. Joshua was so worked up about Zen that when he caught sight of the magic array system plate beside him, an idea clicked into his mind. A vague smile spread across his face. Hey there, you disgusting maggot. So, you want to pass the blooded test? Never. An expert at the Cloud sect had designed and installed the whole magic array system on Bloody Mountain. Supporting the large system were thousands of magic arrays varying in size from small to large, and the system controlled the beasts. Since this kid embarrassed him, there was no way Zen would pass the blooded test, unless Joshua let it happen. Looking around, Joshua made sure no one was watching him before discreetly turning, walking up to the system plate, and placing his hands on the innermost circle of the plate. The system plate had 5 circles, representing the 5 layers in Bloody Mountain. They went from the easiest on the outside, getting progressively harder, to the innermost layer, where stayed a solitary 5-grade beast, whose strength was comparable to a master at nature level. Since the disciples were at lower levels, no one had set foot on the final layer to challenge the 5-grade beast in the history of Bloody Mountain. As a matter of fact, many people questioned whether or not the 5th layer and 5-grade beast were necessary because it was impossible for anyone to challenge it successfully. It seemed pointless for a 5-grade beast to be there. Why? Because it expended so much energy to imagine one with the magic array system. This was a complete waste of power that they could apply to many other places. Every time a master proposed to get rid of it though, the suggestion was rejected. Why not just let it be? After all, there was no need to make changes. Since the 5-grade beast had been created, it could just stay on the 5th layer and remain there, silently, with no issues. That was the reason given by the senior managers at the Cloud sect. Working quietly, Joshua erased the circle at the core of the system plate, forcing the 5-grade beast to leave the center. As the innermost circle vanished, the beast, under Joshua's control, rose, rushing in Zen's direction. When Joshua saw that the 5-grade creature was closer to Zen, he drew his arms back. You might have been able to withstand the power of Cut-all like air dagger, but, let's see how will you stand up against the strength of a 5-grade beast. Ha ha ha. Joshua said, smiling ferociously. Meanwhile, Zen was oblivious to the fact that he was the center of attention, with masters discussing him in his flesh or that he had aroused a great disturbance outside. After Zen eliminated Ryan, the dozens of crystal fragments that had belonged to Ryan were all his. The crystal fragments he had in hand were far beyond the requirements of the blooded test. What now? He wondered, breathing a sigh of relief. All Zen needed to do now was find a corner to wait quietly until the end of the test and maybe take a little break. Then he would be an outer disciple at the Cloud sect. He finally had time to check the many gashes in his clothes and realized he was covered in blood. Luckily, for him, even though the wound looked awful, there wasn't really any pain. The wounds the threads had made on his hands and feet were bloody and looked severely mutilated. However, these were all trauma and didn't hurt his life energy, which might make it simpler for him to heal. Clenching his fists tightly, Zen pushed his energy out. Deep red blood-like liquid suddenly flowed along the wound sites, down his arms and legs. Under pressure he exerted, the wounds quickly closed. Zen controlled his muscles to heal instantly. This was something anyone at the peak of flesh refining level could do. In that short time, he was able to recover and feel much better. Waiting until the wounds were almost healed, Zen paced back and forth, to make sure there was no more pain in his body. Then he glanced around and walked away. In his heart, there remained some questions. The weapon he got from Ryan was a spiritual weapon. I wonder how many dragon scales will be lighted up if the black fire in my mind swallows the spiritual weapon. 3, 4, maybe 5, considered Zen. While he still wasn't clear about that, he knew the iron essence he refined would be more than that of a top-grade mysterious weapon. Zen shrugged and kept moving. After Ryan was beaten and encased in light, the dagger was left behind. If he did feed it to the black fire, the Fang clan would not let it pass, but chase him down. He wasn't strong enough to loot a spiritual weapon. As for the crystal fragments that he got from Ryan, he did not know what to do with them. If he found Nori, he could give him some. What annoyed Zen was that the 3rd layer was so vast. He couldn't find Nori. Where would he find Nori? While meandering along, lost in thought, Zen was suddenly jarred. The ground under him shook violently, nearly making him lose his balance. As the ground shook again, he heard, "Tuud," as though something very large was walking toward him. Boom, thuud, boom, the ground shuddered so violently, Zen staggered like a drunkard. The animal's heavy steps became louder, and the tremors under Zen's feet became more powerful the closer the monster got. The jagged rocks rattled and bounced on the ground, and then, the hillside split open. His heart skipped a beat, but he got control quickly enough. Something was headed at him, and that something must be enormous, he thought. What now? Why are so many things so dead set on messing with me? Am I just ill-fated? This is only supposed to be a test. Zen bemoaned while dodging flying stones. He wanted to cry. As Zen stared, he saw 4 ordinary disciples and 2 noble clan disciples racing for their lives, screaming and crying in fear. They were barely out when the stone forest behind them collapsed. Following on their heels was a giant lumbering monster. The monster was humanoid, but there were 2 sharp tusks on its head, mouth full of spiked teeth, and its eyes were like twin blazing flames. Is that an ogre? As Zen stared up at the nearly 20-foot-tall monster, his jaw dropped. Judging from the 2 oversized fangs jutting from the sides of its mouth, this was an ogre. All Zen knew about ogres was that they were more powerful than humans, had been deadly enemies with humankind since ancient times. At least that was what was recorded in various books about the legends of the ogre. They were bloodthirsty, brutal, and they ate humans. All kinds of legends were passed down orally about the ogres and scared people at the mere mention. Adults were terrified, and tended to tell their children if they didn't behave, the ogres would come to eat them, which would usually make kids silent. But that wasn't the principal problem. The problem was that, obviously, the ogre wasn't supposed to be on the 3rd layer. Before he could figure out what was going on, the ogre started to attack. The ogre rushed a disciple, swatting at him with the back of its hand. The pupil was sent sailing through the air, and dots of lights appeared as he landed, indicating he was out of the game. Another noble pupil's plight was worse, as the ogre snatched him up, shaking him like a rag doll. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not break away. He screamed hysterically, as the massive monster raised him, popping the tiny noble clansman into its mouth. Within the mouth of the ogre, a myriad of lights appeared, instantly illuminating its mouth. Another pupil was out in a short time. Finally, Zen reacted. This was at least a 5-grade beast. Why a 5-grade beast would appear on the 3rd layer, Zen didn't have time to think over. His only thought now was, run. Thinking he could get away unnoticed, Zen took off, heading away from the ogre. Unexpectedly, the monster ceased chasing other initiates, thudding off after Zen. Behind him, Zen heard the heavy crashing of lumbering, heavy footfall, and thought, oh my goodness. I wouldn't have run if I knew he'd follow me. At that moment he figured he probably should find a spot to hide until the ogre was gone. But, as he looked around, he saw there wasn't much cover to protect him and decided to keep running. Despite how slowly the ogre moved, each step of it was equal to 8 steps. Zen took. So, try as he might, the ogre was much faster than him. It didn't take Zen long to adjust his breathing so he could sprint faster and rid himself of this ogre. After all, he had had enough fragments, so if he were beat to death and knocked out of the game by the ogre now, it would just be an embarrassing injustice. However, even running as quickly as Zen was, the gap between the ogre and him was getting smaller. The 2 were as mismatched in speed as strength. When the ogre was a mere 6 feet away, it lunged toward Zen while swatting its thick palm to smack Zen. Chapter 32. Using the flying knife. At this moment, Zen leapt forward suddenly, and the ogre's attack hit the ground just behind him. The sound of the impact was so loud that Zen's ears ached. When he turned back to look, Zen realized that the force of the attack left a huge palm print on the ground. Had he not jumped away in time, the blow would have landed on his body. Without wasting any time, Zen rolled forward, got up, and continued running. The phantom ogre, who had been created by the illusion, murmured a few incomprehensible ogre words before chasing after Zen. Zen had no choice but to keep running. At the same time, he felt angry and annoyed. Why was this ogre chasing him only? Unfortunately, he couldn't stop to ask for an explanation. Even though the ogre was an illusion, if he were killed by it, he would be embarrassed. Besides, the ogre was an unreal beast. It was illogical to assume that the ogre was capable of thinking rationally. Of course, Zen couldn't communicate with such a creature. While Zen struggled with his escape, the scene outside Bloody Mountain was also messy. Many instructors had discovered through the picture slabs that the ogre had escaped from the 5th level and entered the 3rd level. Joshua, do you know what is going on? Shouldn't this ogre be in the 5th level? How could he break through the magic arrays and enter the 3rd level? This has never happened before. Faced with those questions, Joshua stammered, I don't know what's going on. Maybe there is something wrong with the magic arrays in the Bloody Mountain. Otherwise, I have no explanation for how this could happen. I demand that the blooded test be stopped immediately, said one of the instructors. Yes, the blooded test should be stopped. I'm afraid that if the participants on the Bloody Mountain are attacked by this creature, they will all be unfairly removed from the exam. I've long suggested that the grade 5 phantom beast should be eliminated. It's meaningless to put it there. I really don't know what the top-level masters are thinking. Another instructor agreed, too. He nodded and echoed this sentiment. Wait, don't jump to conclusions in haste. A master exclaimed. On hearing this, the 2 instructors who had been talking about the elimination of the unreal beast turned around and asked, what is happening now? Come and see. This ogre seems to be chasing Zen. The master switched the screen on the picture slab to one of the noble clan disciples. These instructors peered at the screen and saw that Zen was desperately running for his life. Ha, so what? I agree that this young fellow's strength is astonishing, but do you remember Johann Lin? When Johann attended the blooded test with the strength of the marrow refining level, he was proud of his superior power and wanted to fight with this unreal beast. But in the end, he had been badly injured and could only run away. Another instructor commented. Johann Lin had been the best disciple Cloud Sect had seen in the past 100 years. He became famous only 3 years after entering Cloud Sect. At the age of 19, he passed the trial of Cloud Road and became a member of Cloud Hall. Both his genius and strength were outstanding and rare in the world. Some referred to him as a super genius owing to his skills and abilities. The strength and talent that Zen had shown at this stage were quite distinguished, but in the minds of many instructors, he was still not as good as Johann. Moreover, at that time when Johann sought out the ogre, he was at the level of marrow refining, which was a realm higher than Zen's current level. Even Johann, who was stronger than Zen, had to accept defeat and run from the ogre. How could Zen have the slightest possibility of resisting against the unreal beast? Though they had such feelings and comparisons in their minds, most of the instructors still paid close attention to Zen, who was considered as the biggest surprise this year. After a short debate, they stopped arguing and watched the screen to see what Zen would do. Seeing that none of the instructors were questioning him, Joshua smiled. He was satisfied that his trick had worked. Sneaky simpleton, you will die. How can you escape from the attack of the devil ogre? I can't wait to see your dead body. With these thoughts in his mind, Joshua also turned to the picture slab. It was still broadcasting the fight, or in other words, the unilateral attack from the ogre, as Zen wasn't attacking back. He was just running. With his flexible body, precise and calculated movements, powerful explosive force, and a little bit of luck, Zen had avoided the attacks of the ogre so far. Running is never a good solution. If I keep running like this, I will eventually get exhausted and the ogre will catch me. Its powerful blow will take me out of the exam. Zen thought. There was not enough time for him to think of a solution. He found that his attention was divided. On the one hand, he needed to escape and on the other, he needed to observe the ogre's intentions to avoid its attacks. As he ran, Zen recalled that the ogre's body was entirely different from that of a human. Starting from birth, the ogre was much stronger than a human in terms of physical strength. So, in ancient times, human beings suffered tremendously during wars with ogres. But the Creator was fair. Ogres had a fatal defect, which made them vulnerable. They had 2 hearts. One heart was insufficient to generate enough power to support their tough and robust body. So, ogres required a second heart. Having 2 hearts was not a fatal flaw. The anomaly allowed ogres to have greater forces. However, the placement of the heart was an issue. The second heart was on their back. Only a thin layer of flesh protected the ogre's second heart. If the layer of flesh was penetrated, it would be easy to smash the second heart, and the ogre would die. Aware of this weakness, all ogres would be equipped with heavy armors when they went to the battlefield. The armor had a high protrusion on the back, which was to protect their second heart. Humans called this kind of armor tortoiseshell in jest. Having fought with this ogre for some time, Zen had noticed that it wore no such protection on its back. As long as he penetrated the flesh and the second heart of the ogre, he could knock it down. And this was the only plan for Zen to escape with his life. While he was still thinking about the solution, a strong wind blew from one side. Zen glanced sideways only to find that the big palm of the ogre was coming toward him. Oh, my goodness, no time to run away. This time, even though Zen wanted to dodge the attack, he did not have enough time to do so. There was no other alternative except to fight. Zen made his decision quickly. He gritted his teeth, turned around, and then jumped on the back of the ogre's hand. Running along the back of its hand to its arm, Zen then jumped onto the ogre's shoulder. With a somersault, Zen crossed over the ogre's head. At this moment, his nose was only inches away from the two sharp horns on the ogre's head. With these calculated movements, Zen had finally reached the ogre's back. It was then that he could see the prominent protrusion on its back. This is it, taste my purple fist strength. You devil. Zen summoned all his strength and channeled it to his fist. Then he hit the protrusion. This protrusion was the second heart of the devil. A purple light flowed out of Zen's body. If he could manage to inject the purple fist strength through the thin layer of the ogre's flesh, its heart would be smashed to pieces. However, to his surprise, Zen's fist slipped when his attack landed on the ogre's back. Its skin was so slippery. Oh, my goodness, I failed, Zen thought as an overwhelming feeling of danger flowed through him. In the next moment, the clumsy ogre sensed where Zen was and slapped him when he turned around. Bang! A loud sound echoed. The ogre had managed to land a blow on Zen while he was on its back. Its power pushed Zen far away. Seeing Zen flying dozens of feet away because of the impact, like a small stone, the instructors sighed deeply. What a pity, he has almost done it. What a good opportunity was lost just now. The skin of the ogre is too tough to be broken by a little fellow who is just at the organ refining level. Yes, I think so. However, it is a pity that he does not have a spiritual weapon in hand. Otherwise, he would have beaten the ogre. All the instructors watching the picture slabs could not help but sigh deeply. Anyway, in all the time that the ogre had been in the test, Zen was the only candidate to pose a threat to the ogre. In retrospect, were these instructors really expecting this man at the organ refining level to defeat a grade 5 unreal beast? Their expectations seemed a bit unrealistic. This incident drew some of their attentions back to reality. Wait, don't run away. Suddenly, one of the instructors shouted. Initially, these instructors could not see Zen in their picture slabs. They could only observe him through other disciples, cards. Before the ogre beat Zen, there were a few disciples bold enough to follow them and watch their battle. Once they saw that the ogre had defeated Zen, these disciples turned and immediately ran away. They did not have the courage or the strength to face the ogre. As soon as they had run away, the instructors could no longer see Zen. However, most of instructors knew that there was no need to see the fight to its end. Zen would be eliminated eventually. Only Master Su kept looking at her picture slab. Several emotions passed through her as she watched the scene. She had tampered with Zen's disciple card earlier. And now, only she could see Zen's every move in her picture slab. As far as she was concerned, Zen's physical strength was indeed extreme. Even though the ogre had slapped him, Zen did not look as bad as other instructors thought. This fellow has not given up till now. He has a strong will. Powerful and determined, Zen is more than a match for most disciples, thought Master Su. I hope this young man passes the test. With this hope in mind, Master Su turned her eyes back to the picture slab. Zen was still lying on the ground. His chest heaved as Zen took deep breaths to calm himself. The power of that slap was so terrible that he felt like all his bones had been smashed to pieces. Fortunately, his body was strong enough to withstand the blow. Zen's body had absorbed most of the ogre's power, and at the same time, it had transformed the force into warm currents that were refreshing his body. However, there was still a small portion of the power left, which was enough to cause serious injury to Zen's body. With no strength left to move, Zen could only lie on the ground and wait for the warm currents to restore his body. Meanwhile, he closely watched the ogre. Feeling the trembling of the ground, he knew that the ogre was getting close to him. Even though agonizing pain coursed through Zen's body with even a smallest movement, he did not want to give up yet. As long as there was a small chance, Zen wanted to fight back. When the ogre saw his prey lying on the ground, it slowed down. The ogre even stopped and studied Zen for some time. Then he raised his foot and was about to step on Zen with the intention of trampling him to death. Maybe because the ogre felt that its prey was unable to move, it raised its foot slowly. The slow movement gave Zen the time he needed to roll away. Enduring the agonizing pain, he climbed up from the ground. Zen intended to jump up at the same time. Ouch! That hurts. Although Zen was determined not to wait for his death at the hands of the ogre, the movements caused a tremendous amount of pain to flow through him. He could not help but cry out in agony. The pain from the inner bones was so significant that his body lost flexibility and he could not jump up as he had planned to. In this case, Zen needed a new plan. Without hesitating, he took out the broken flying knife from his space ring and then summoned all his strength before throwing the flying knife at the ogre. I hope it works, Zen prayed in his heart. This was his last hope. If this strike did not cause any harm to the ogre, then Zen was doomed to be eliminated from the blooded test. Zen watched the flying knife with bated breath. He was shocked when he saw the root of the flying knife. Chapter 33. A feeling of distress. The flying knife, like a dart, quickly penetrated the ogre's back. More strangely, the flying knife ran through the ogre's body effortlessly until it fell onto the ground with its force spent. At this sight, Zen was rendered speechless. He considered two possibilities. The first was that he was powerful enough to throw the flying knife through the ogre, but this was obviously impossible. Another possibility was that the seemingly broken flying knife was sharp enough to run through the ogre. Zen found that the second possibility was more likely than the first. This is a powerful flying knife. Zen marveled at the knife's magic. The colossal ogre was overcome with pain and staggered until spots of light consumed it. Zen killed the only grade 5 unreal beast. Ding! A pure black crystal fragment fell onto the ground and bounced toward Zen's hand. The black crystal fragment was all that Zen needed to pass the blooded test. Zen, with the black crystal fragment in hand, could not help but curse the designer of the magic array. Zen would rather deal with numerous grade 3 unreal beasts than the grade 5 unreal beast, namely, the ogre. Zen, at that moment, was not short of other colored crystal fragments. Now, he was more concerned about the flying knife than the fragments. Still reeling from the pain caused by the ogre's blow, Zen managed to take several steps. The knife had fallen in the bushes and shrubs. He could no longer see it. The magical flying knife is a must for my collection, Zen thought. How can it be lost? Zen wondered. After a careful and meticulous search, Zen finally found a small hole in the ground. Too bad. Considering its overwhelming strength, the flying knife must have embedded itself in the ground, Zen thought. He forced the ground open 7 or 8 feet with sustained efforts and yet, he couldn't see the flying knife. At this point, Zen found that his surroundings were gradually changing. The magic realm was collapsing, which turned Zen's thoughts back to the completion of the blooded test and the end of the magic array. A second later, Zen was surprised to find himself in a completely different scene. He found himself back on the bloody mountain which boasted of scarlet vegetation. And the place Zen was just digging was out of sight. My flying knife, how could I bear losing you? Zen was distraught over the loss of his precious knife. Since the illusion had faded away, Zen's unreal injuries also disappeared. His body no longer hurt from the ogre's assault. Zen redoubled his efforts to search for the knife. But it was almost impossible for Zen to find the flying knife amid the vast expanse of the bloody mountain. At that moment, a master who had been watching the blooded test from a flying chariot came to collect Zen. Other masters were engaged in a lively discussion concerning several participants, including the ordinary disciples and those from noble clans. Some of them had shown excellent performance and were considered to have great potential. Those who had forecast Zen's failure had not expected such a comeback. Zen alighted from the flying chariot and walked forward to ask, "To whom should I submit these crystal fragments?" "Please come here." A female instructor in a yellow dress waved Zen forward. She was in charge of counting crystal fragments obtained by participating disciples. She had prepared 4 baskets to collect 4 differently colored crystal fragments that participants had been tasked with acquiring. All masters present at that moment became confused when they saw Zen. Subject to the rules of the blooded test, Zen's failure in the magic array would make it impossible for him to pass the test, even though he had many crystal fragments. Joshua had expected Zen to fail the blooded test as he had used the magic array plate to release the grade 5 unreal beast, even though Joshua had been fearful of others' suspicions. Now Joshua was gleeful about Zen's failure, leading to his feeling of distress. Joshua thought he should inform Zen of the rules of the blooded test. But when Joshua saw Zen throw the black crystal fragment, he became paralyzed with terror. Joshua was stunned by what that implied. The instructor in the yellow dress marveled at Zen's possession of the black crystal fragment. Despite her long experience of collecting crystal fragments from participants, this was her first contact with a black crystal fragment. While she was clueless about the black crystal, the other masters realized how Zen had come in possession of the black crystal. Zen must have defeated the unreal beast, they pondered. And the black crystal fragment must belong to the ogre, the unreal beast he killed. All of a sudden, silence reigned at the scene. The unreal beast was designed to be invincible. The black crystal fragment on the table was shining, as if by magic. How could this black crystal fragment appear here? The instructor in the yellow dress thought. She suspected Zen of having cheated. At that moment, a dignified middle-aged man came forward to explain, this black crystal fragment is unparalleled. It has remained unclaimed since the start of the magic array at the Bloody Mountain. That is why you have never seen such a crystal fragment before. The female instructor's eyebrows rose when she heard the explanation. The scholarly middle-aged man then turned to make an offer to Zen. Zen, due to your excellent performance during the blooded test, we are thrilled to accept you at Billow Peak. I am Master Joe, and I am here to welcome you. Azure Peak is more influential than Billow Peak. And we have better benefits. A bald man stepped forward and roared. Master Zhang, how could you cast a slur at my peak? Despite its unstable performance, our peak has always ranked among the top 3 since a decade ago. Our ranking dwarfs yours, Master Joe retorted harshly. The disputes and quarrels were interrupted when Master Shu stepped forward. He was revered as he led Skytop Peak. Zen was aware that Billy and Perrin were members of Skytop Peak. Master Shu pointed out the advantages of joining his peak with great composure in a bid to influence Zen's decision. By no means would Zen consider joining Skytop Peak, given his strife and personal vendetta against Perrin. Zen is bound to join Drizzle Peak. Master Su's light voice silenced all other masters. She presumed to win Zen's admission, as she had been the first to sense Zen's potential and had become his patron. Although the other masters were in deference to Master Su, they didn't want to submit lightly in the matter regarding the selection of high-potential disciples. Master Su, you should compete with us for the privilege of selecting disciples in a spirit of fairness, Master Shu challenged Master Su calmly. Master Su, you can't always do this. Master Su, your peak's reputation does not justify your aggressiveness. The other masters present bombarded Master Su with their unanimous opposition. Master Su's desire to acquire Zen as her peak's disciple and her usual arrogance finally triggered collective hostility from her counterparts. But Master Su dismissed their suggestions and opinions with an arrogant wave of her hand. Sensing Master Su's displeasure, the other masters had to stop voicing their dissatisfaction. If the masters dared to offend her, they would be removed from Cloud Sect. Master Su sighed and said, it is advisable that we select disciples in line with their rankings and preferences. With no other alternative, the masters accepted Master Su's suggestion. But they were not aware of Master Su's determination to secure Zen as her disciple. They hadn't the slightest clue that she had hatched a scheme to get what she wanted. Master Su was pleased with the prospect when the counting was in progress. Chapter 34. Recover the Flying Knife. Zen stood among the disciples who had passed the test. One by one, more disciples emerged from the Bloody Mountain. They took turns throwing crystal fragments into the baskets. Suddenly Zen spotted Nori jumping out of a flying chariot. He gave Zen a cheerful wave before he hurried to the baskets. Zen watched as Nori took out a handful of crystal fragments and placed them into the baskets. Nori had passed the test too. Zen was quite surprised. Nori was only at the bone refining level. How was it possible for him to collect 10 purple fragments in the test? During the test, Zen had planned to give Nori spare fragments once he had reached the 3rd level. However, Zen encountered the ogre and then, he didn't get the chance. Zen didn't know how, but it seemed as though Nori had passed the blooded test all by himself. It was impossible for a man at the bone refining level to kill the unreal beasts in the 3rd level. How did Nori manage it? Could Nori have been downplaying his abilities? The thought flashed through Zen's mind. Smiling, Nori walked over to Zen, obviously pleased with himself. Ha, I have passed the test, Zen. How did you do that? How did you get enough fragments? Zen asked. Well, it's a long story. The short version is that I got lucky. Then he told Zen what happened after he entered the 3rd level. Nori happened to see 2 disciples from noble clans fighting each other for a fragment. At last, both disciples were critically wounded and forced out of the test. Nori took advantage and collected their fragments. That was how he passed the test. As he listened, Zen couldn't help but marvel at Nori's good luck. Flying chariots flew back and forth till the last of the disciples had collected in the square. The blooded test was finally over. While those who passed the test were in high spirits, those who failed looked utterly crestfallen. The eliminated disciples from noble clans were quickly taken away by their families. They could hardly contain their resentment. Chad Zug shot a look of pure venom at Zen before he left. He had always prided himself on his ability before taking the test. Although this was his first shot at the blooded test, Chad had been confident that he would pass it. After all, it was a rare thing for a disciple from the top 7 noble clans to fail the blooded test. Chad had never expected that Zen would defeat him. It certainly didn't sit well with him. Zen and Nori were talking and laughing at the far side. Of course, Zen noticed the venomous look from Chad, yet it didn't concern him. Being a body refiner was not easy. It was a long and difficult road, full of peril. Zen felt ready for the upcoming challenges. He would overcome all obstacles in his way. Now that he had decided to go down this road, Zen knew he must not fear making some enemies. At this point, Perrin and Billy looked the most frustrated and exasperated of all. Earlier, Billy had sent 2 of his clansmen who had registered for the blooded test to kill Zen in the Bloody Mountain. But it turned out that he had underestimated Zen. Dim and Tim also failed the test. They allied with Chad to rob from others. And then they came across Zen. But before they had the time to use their final killer, they were knocked out of the test by other participants. It was downright humiliating. Even Billy, who always acted casual, was unable to contain his emotions. When he learned of what had happened, he launched a furious tirade at them before allowing his clansmen to be taken away. He would have to spend more time thinking about how to deal with Zen. As for Perrin, he could only trail behind Billy with a sullen face. Perrin would just embarrass himself if he went to mock Zen. He had never thought that Zen, who had been as insignificant as a tiny ant, would grow into an intimidating opponent. That night, all participants who had passed the test officially joined Cloud Sect as outer disciples. Since it was late, the mentors from all 33 peaks would have to choose their disciples the next day. And so, these new disciples had to spend the night at the foot of the Bloody Mountain. The atmosphere in the dormitory was more relaxed. After a tough haul, the disciples had finally met their first goal. Some of them were so excited that they could hardly fall asleep. They spent most of the evening talking all about the choices of peaks. Master Shu from the Skytop Peak was the most discussed person among these newcomers. There were many tales about Skytop Peak. Topping all other 32 peaks, it was said to cream off most talents in the sect. Zen and Nori sat at the corner of the room, listening to this discussion. Nori listened intently. His eyes glittered with anticipation. Zen saw his expression and asked, "So which peak do you prefer?" "Skytop Peak." Nori scratched his head and laughed, "I wish. But I'm afraid I won't qualify for it." Nori was acutely aware of what he was capable of. Skytop Peak would choose the disciples who had performed well in the test. He assumed that the big man with a great sword would probably get into Skytop Peak. "Zen, I have decided to stick with you. I find that I am lucky as long as I stay with you," Nori said. There was some degree of truth in Nori's conclusion. If it hadn't been for Zen, Nori might not have passed the initial exam. And if Zen hadn't helped him during the blooded test, Nori would have been eliminated already. "What if I go to Drizzle Peak?" Zen asked, smiling. The question brought Nori up short. Then after a moment's hesitation, he exclaimed, "Are you kidding me?" According to Zen's brilliant performance in the test, he could get into any peak he wanted. But now, Zen was considering going to Drizzle Peak. Nori had to remind him, "Bro, Drizzle Peak is at the bottom of all peaks. You know that, don't you?" Zen nodded as Master Su's face flashed through his mind. If it hadn't been for her, he would have been disqualified by Joshua in the test. But if Drizzle Peak ranked last, then its support couldn't compare with any other peaks. Its disciples would have 2 strikes against them when it came to their quota of pills, refining methods or other monthly supplies. Zen hesitated for a moment. As the night wore on, Zen shoved everything else out of his mind and focused on something more important. He had to get his knife back even if it meant that he had to turn Bloody Mountain upside down. After Nori drifted into a deep sleep, Zen slid out of the room. He went to the foot of the mountain under cover of darkness. Vaguely, he found the trial he had taken earlier and began to ascend the mountain. The magic array was inactive at this hour, and so, there weren't too many unreal beasts. Since the magic red sand had made the mountain inhospitable to animals, even real beasts were rare. The mountain seemed different without the magic array. Zen dashed around for a while as he searched several places and tried to find the spot where he had fought the ogre, but it all came to nothing. His knife was buried deep in the huge mountain. Trying to find it could be like looking for a needle in a haystack. He searched for about an hour and then completely lost his bearing in the dark. It seemed that Zen would have to go through every corner of the mountain to get his knife back. It was such a great weapon. It was a pity that he had only used the knife once. The result disheartened Zen. Suddenly, not far away some twigs rustled and swayed, then a woman dressed in green walked out from the trees. As the woman sauntered over, her beautiful face gleamed in the moonlight. She was wearing a green floating dress, which showed off her perfect curve. She was stunning, and for a moment, Zen was enchanted. As soon as he recognized that the woman was Master Su from Drizzle Peak, Zen withdrew his gaze immediately and greeted her with a smile. "Hi, Master Su. What are you doing here so late? You are supposed to be in the dormitory." Master Su asked. Her lips curved into a sly smile. "I couldn't sleep, so I decided to take a walk here." Zen's face grew hot since he was telling a blatant lie. "Is that so?" Master Su took 2 steps toward Zen, her bright eyes surveying his face. "Why did you choose to come here, the Bloody Mountain, for a walk?" Her voice was clear and pure. Zen could tell that her tone was mischievous. "Exactly," Zen spread his hands and shrugged. He returned her smile. "Well, I don't think so." Master Su shook her head and said, "I think you are looking for something." Zen coughed in embarrassment. Then he scratched his head, surprised by her acute judgment. "I guess that is a private matter, Master Su." "Oh, if it's private, then I will respect your boundaries and be on my way." "Bye," Master Su replied as she swung a knife in front of him. Zen's eyes brightened when he saw the knife. He said quickly, "Master Su, the knife. Is it yours?" Master Su turned with the grace of a fairy and looked straight into his eyes. Of course, she knew it was Zen's knife. She was the only master who had witnessed firsthand the whole fight between Zen and the ogre. She knew where the knife had fallen and retrieved it easily in the night. Zen nodded. "Yes, it is my knife, Master Su." "Well, it is a cracked knife, but it is powerful." "Good stuff. I can give it back to you, but," Master Su added, "on one condition." "Name it," Zen said. "You join Drizzle Peak," Master Su said with a sly smile. Zen had been expecting her to say that. All this while, he had been hesitating about which peak to choose. But now he knew without a doubt which peak he would pick. His choice seemed to be influenced by Master Su. Her behavior seemed a little shady, but she had found his knife. He might never have found the knife had it not been for her assistance. As he thought of this, Zen nodded and said sincerely, "I will choose Drizzle Peak tomorrow." Master Su gave him a sweet smile. She tapped the ring on her slender finger. A second later, 2 small rings appeared in her palm. "Your knife is cracked, plus you can't control the knife with your life vitality unless you reach the nature level. That is why you can't make the knife return after you throw it. Here is my, welcome to Drizzle Peak, gift. Take it." Zen looked at the 2 small rings and blinked. He had no clue about the function of the gift. Chapter 35. Selecting a refinement method. Noticing the bewildered look on Zen's face, Master Su attached one small ring to the hilt of the flying knife and slipped the other on her thumb. She hurled the flying knife down the mountain. Zen cried out at the sight of what Master Su did. The flying knife was so sharp that it could have embedded in the ground anywhere, and since it was so dark out, it would be hard to find. However, a second later Master Su flicked her wrist, and the flying knife returned to her hand. It was a marvel to behold in Zen's opinion. The 2 small rings were inconspicuous, as though an invisible thread connected them. After throwing the flying knife, it only took a gentle tug, and it returned. It was a razor-sharp knife, but Master Su caught it in her hand without an issue. Zen admired her skill enormously. Taking the flying knife and set of small rings from Master Su, Zen respectfully bowed and stated, "Thank you, for your generous gift, Master Su." Master Su gave a slight chuckle and patted his head. "Don't stand on ceremony, you're going to be a member of my Drizzle Peak. Run along and rest now," she urged graciously. "Tomorrow you will pick refinement techniques after the peak selection." Zen nodded and walked back down the mountain the way he had come. On his way back, he slipped one small ring on his thumb and the other onto the hilt of his flying knife. He threw the blade as Master Su had done, but when he tugged it, the knife shot at him. Breaking into a cold sweat, Zen threw himself onto the ground, and the knife narrowly missed him. Although his body was exceptionally tough, Zen wasn't strong enough to withstand the sharp flying knife. How did Master Su make it look so easy to catch the flying knife with her bare hand? Why couldn't he? After practicing several times, he finally mastered a little trick. It was midnight when Zen returned to the dormitory. All the disciples who had participated in the blooded test were fast asleep. Zen slipped into bed, closed his eyes and fell asleep. Early the next morning, the masters and disciples gathered to begin discussing the peak selection. Yesterday's crystal fragments of the blooded test had been tallied, and the participating disciples were now ranked. Because Zen killed a level 5 unreal beast, he was undisputed number 1, and therefore a highly sought-after disciple by all the masters. The masters were all quarreling about Zen joining their respective peak. Every month they bickered with each other to win the champion over to their peaks. After a long heated argument, the masters were at a standstill, so they sought Zen's advice to find out which peak he wanted to join. When the outer disciples near Zen heard that, they were filled with jealousy. Zen is lucky, he gets to choose which peak he wants to join, most of the outer disciples thought admiringly. If I were him, I would choose Skytop Peak. After all, it ranks highest among all 33 peaks. All the masters waited for Zen's decision. Master Shu was more confident than the other masters that he would be adding Zen to his peak. After all, Skytop Peak was the most powerful peak out of the 33 and had an excellent reputation. Thus, he firmly believed that only a fool would choose a different peak. I choose the Drizzle Peak, stated Zen quietly. For a moment, the masters sat in stunned silence. They thought Zen would choose one of the top 10 of the 33 peaks. Maybe the second-ranked peak, Black Rock, or the Azure Peak, which was 5th ranked. None of them ever expected Zen to select the Drizzle Peak because it was ranked lowest of the peaks. What the heck, they wondered. Master Su walked up to Zen slowly, smiling brightly, and said, I accept your choice. Then she looked around at the others present and declared, Zen is now an outer disciple of the Drizzle Peak. Some of the masters, including Master Shu, looked a little angry. They assumed that Master Su paid to get Zen, otherwise, he wouldn't choose the Drizzle Peak. Master Su, do you think it's appropriate? Questioned Master Shu sourly. He was determined to win Zen over. A merit-based system of admittances had always been the tradition of the 33 peaks, although everyone knew that a disciple might be excellent today and just as easily fail tomorrow. In the long history of the Cloud sect, there had been countless gifted disciples, but not many of them made significant achievements in the end. However, the simple truth was that the more disciples a peak had that were skilled, the more likely that peak was to achieve something. Oh, Master Shu, is there a problem with that? It's a mutual matter. I think you understand, sneered Master Su. If you want to make further changes, I'll play. But, I wonder if you have the stomach. Judging from Master Su's confident attitude and Zen's unwavering choice, it was clear that the two had reached a secret agreement. The other masters kept silent, criticizing Master Su inwardly. If Master Su were unreasonable, they could argue, but, since she wasn't, they would be asking for trouble if they messed with Master Su now. With the end of that argument, the struggle for the top disciple ended, so the masters moved on to the second-ranked outer disciple. Basing his decision on Zen's, Nori chose the Drizzle Peak too. Half of the day was gone before all the disciples who participated in the test were assigned to a peak. The work for the day wasn't over yet though. There was still the critical task of choosing the refinement method that suited them. At the Cloud sect, there was a hall called the Heavenly Library. In this library were housed almost all the methods known to the entire empire. However, it wasn't easy for a Cloud sect disciple to go there and select a refinement method. Each selection cost 100 points, which had a market price of 200 cubic crystals. To the noble clan disciples, 100 points might not be much, but to most of the common disciples, it was a lot. What annoyed all the disciples equally was how many refinement methods there were in the Heavenly Library, whether high or low-level refinement methods, which made it hard to choose. Some disciples managed to accumulate 100 points, but that would only buy the barbaric fist. The book was inexpensive, selling for only a dozen gold in the imperial capital, so, paying 100 points was a waste of points. There was an art to pick a refinement method at the Heavenly Library. All outer disciples were granted access to the Heavenly Library once to select a refinement method. Under guidance from the masters, they headed for the Heavenly Library. The deeper into the Cloud sect that someone went, the more they experienced its vastness. After passing mountain forests, lakes and magnificent buildings of various shapes, they finally came to the gates of a great hall. The hall had a purple haze covering it. With careful observation, streaks of purple light could be seen emitting from it. As Zen stared at the bright glow, his eyes hurt. It was a peculiar feeling, similar, but much weaker, to that of the cyan dragon figure in his mind. Pupils, don't look directly into the light, reminded one of the masters warmly. Through your eyes, it can damage your soul. Hearing this, the outer disciples immediately looked away from the light. As important as a man's soul was, a common saying used to describe damage came about of soul injury. Someone with even a minor soul injury would feel the effects, like dizziness and weakness for several days, while more serious soul injury might leave a person paralyzed or cause brain damage severe enough to make him an idiot for several years. What is the light, Master? Asked one of the outer disciples. It is known as the intent, explained the Master. Intent is what everything in the world has that gives them existence. The human has intent, as does heaven, the sword as well as the saber, pointed out the Master. Then he pointed to the purple light, adding, at one time, our cloud sect killed a vengeful beast and buried it here. The purple aura is its intent. TN, the vengeful beast is a species of a headless creature that battles against heaven. With the explanation the Master gave, Zen learned something else. If that's the case, then maybe it is the dragon intent, giving the cyan dragon its intense energy. Zen thought. There was no way Zen would ever forget how it felt as the dragon intent was tearing his soul. But then, what is the intent, and how does it happen? He wondered, mystified by the new knowledge. Zen decided to keep his question to himself for now. Deep in thought, Zen almost ran into the disciple in front of him when everyone came to a stop in front of the platform of the heavenly library. Keep in mind that this is your only opportunity to choose a refinement method free of cost. Also, kindly remember, the deeper into the heavenly library you go, the higher the refinement method levels are. But, at the same time, the stronger the vengeful beast intent will become. At that point, even if your eyes are closed, its intent will burn your soul. Warned one of the masters. Accordingly, you should proceed as far as you can, but don't exert yourself. Okay, now, go on in. The Master had barely finished giving instructions, and the outer disciples were scattering as they entered the heavenly library. Among the many disciples, Zen climbed the stairs and entered a magnificent hall. Standing in the middle of the great hall, Zen saw a towering word cast in black iron. It was a number, 1. The refinement techniques offered out here in the outermost part of the heavenly library are all worthless rubbish. Several of the noble clansmen called out as they continued walking and passed the entranceway bearing the large number 1. Lining the shelves in this hall were books of various Tier 1 refinement methods. Considering that each shelf houses about 10,000 different Tier 1 refinement methods, and there are 20 shelves, then that means there are 200,000 Tier 1 different refinement methods in this hall. Zen thought. Tier 1 refinement methods were widespread throughout the empire. In spite of the vulgar manner the noble disciples stated about them, they were right, these methods were not worth much. Only a few disciples lingered here, most of them went further into the library. Zen didn't hesitate to follow the crowd heading deeper into the heavenly library. He noticed that instead of following, Nori remained in the hall of the Tier 1 refinement techniques. Walking about 100 feet further, the crowd came to the next hall. In the middle of the entrance was a large number 2. Needless to say, this was the hall of the Tier 2 refinement methods. Here, the aura of the vengeful beast's purple intent was stronger than in the first hall, which made some of the outer disciples turn back because they felt ill. It was the strength of someone's soul that determined how well they resisted the intent of the vengeful beast. The vast majority of those disciples had never honed their souls. Naturally, some people were born with stronger souls, while others were not. It was like any genetic differences and had nothing to do with their strength. Several outer disciples didn't want to give up, even though they already felt very ill. So, they stood still, closed their eyes and tried hard to withstand the intent of the vengeful beast. However, it didn't take long for the color to drain from their faces, and a wave of dizziness came over them. Finally, with no other choice, they left the hall. Making a bad situation worse, one disciple fainted in the room and needed to be carried back. Most of those remaining acknowledged their limitations and remained at the hall of Tier 2 refinement methods. If those disciples continued to go deeper, their souls were likely to be damaged. Therefore, they stopped there and began searching for the refinement that worked for them. Very few people continued deeper. One of those who did was Zen. Chapter 36, Tier 5 Cultivation Methods. Once past the hall for Tier 2 cultivation methods, Zen looked around. Only 4 other people had accompanied him. One of them was the towering strongman who always held a great sword. Zen knew that this strongman was physically powerful and had boundless energy. He had not expected this strongman to also have a mighty soul. As Zen suspected, Cloud Sect had many outstanding disciples. As Zen walked ahead, the hall that housed Tier 3 refinement methods came into his sight. An eerie purple light radiated from this hall. 5 people entered this hall. Except for Zen, all other people looked unwell. One of them had turned ghastly pale as soon as he had stepped into the hall. From his attire, Zen guessed this was a disciple from a noble clan. Judging from his pallid face, it was evident that he was finding it difficult to resist the intent of the vengeful beast. This disciple reached into his pocket and pulled out a dark gray pill. Then, he closed his eyes and swallowed the pill. When he opened his eyes again, gold rays of light radiated from his eyes. At this sight, Zen realized that the pill invigorated the soul and helped the disciple withstand the intent of the vengeful beast. Disciples from noble clans are so fortunate. Zen murmured and shook his head. Then he thought, how can disciples from ordinary clans acquire such pills? The 5 disciples surveyed the hall. Since they had entered the hall, Tier 3 cultivation methods were accessible to them. In the eastern region, cultivation methods were classified into 4 tiers. Of these 4 tiers, Tier 1 cultivation methods were the most common. Since there were innumerable Tier 1 cultivation methods, they were the cheapest and could be acquired at martial arts clubs. However, Tier 2 cultivation methods were limited in comparison to Tier 1. In general, these were inherited by small clans. For instance, the purple light fist that Zen practiced was just one of many Tier 2 cultivation methods. The Luo clan was neither rich nor big. For such a clan, a book on purple light fist was fairly precious. Hence, they generally didn't share their knowledge of cultivation methods like purple light fist with others. The purple light fist was so rare that even collateral branches of the Luo clan were not allowed to practice this cultivation method. Compared to the first 2 tiers, Tier 3 cultivation methods were even more precious. This kind of knowledge was usually given to collateral branches of noble clans. In the hall for Tier 3 cultivation methods, there was only a single-layer bookcase. Since the bookcase held hundreds of books for Tier 3 cultivation methods, the powerful influence and reach of Cloud Sect were obvious. Zen was certain that it wouldn't be hard for him to find a cultivation method suitable for him. He sifted through the bookcase while thinking about which cultivation method he should pick. Surely, purple light fist was a good choice for Zen. But it would be not enough now that he had joined Cloud Sect, as he couldn't harness his power to the greatest extent by practicing purple light fist exclusively. As a consequence, he would be in an extremely unfavorable situation when he fought with people who practiced high-tier cultivation methods. After thinking for a long while, Zen decided to continue walking toward the next hall. The purple light pouring out of this hall was extremely bright, but it was less overwhelming than the intent of the cyan dragon. Moreover, Zen's soul had been calcined by the black flame inside his body. His soul was far stronger than an ordinary person's. Thinking of this, Zen decided to choose a more powerful cultivation method for himself. The other 4 men stared at him in shock when Zen started to march ahead. Do you want to die? The intent of the vengeful beast appears to be rather predominant in the hall for the Tier 4 cultivation methods. You won't be able to withstand it, the towering strongman gently reminded Zen. Zen smiled in acknowledgement at the strongman before replying, I know that, but I want to try. Hee, don't stop him if he wants to die. I have seen many guys like him who overestimate their abilities. It is said that the intent of the vengeful beast is substantial inside the hall for Tier 4 cultivation methods. In fact, it is so strong that it can kill people intangibly. Anyone who enters that hall before cultivating his or her state of mind will not gain anything except death, the disciple from the noble clan said haughtily. Zen laughed flatly as soon as he heard that disciple. Instead of refuting, Zen stepped into the next hall. Finally, Zen had reached the hall with the rarest cultivation methods. The hall for Tier 4 cultivation methods was much smaller than the former ones. Every book on these cultivation methods was quite rare. These books even contained hidden secrets, which were almost impossible to inherit by even core members of large noble clans. There was only one bookcase inside this hall too. Compared with other tall and luxurious bookcases that Zen had seen in the former halls, this one appeared to be very short, shabby, and old. The wood had decayed over the centuries. Zen felt as though he was surrounded by a completely different intent of the vengeful beast when he stepped into this hall. The purple light had been replaced by purple shadows, which looked like rare beasts. These shadows slowly floated up and down in the hall. Once Zen stepped into the hall, these shadows began bumping into Zen. Perhaps they could sense that a human being had entered the hall. Since the purple shadows were intangible, they couldn't harm Zen's body. However, Zen discovered that these shadows were attacking his soul with every blow to his body. Deep in his brain, Zen felt a sharp stabbing pain. For others, this kind of pain might be fatal. But Zen had a far stronger soul. In spite of this, he was in deep agony. Every shadow bumped into him like an awl, and Zen felt a sharp stab in his head. As a result, Zen felt intense pain deep in his brain. Such pain was not physical, but spiritual. There was nowhere for Zen to hide and escape from the shadows. As a result, he had no choice but to endure the pain caused by the shadows. His soul couldn't withstand the attacks, and it throbbed every time a shadow attacked Zen. He could bear the attack of one shadow. But since all the shadows were attacking Zen one after another, the pain was unbearable. At last, Zen felt as though he would succumb to the pain of being attacked by many shadows. Spiritual things were rather mysterious, and he had never heard of attacks against a person's soul. Naturally, Zen didn't know how to counterattack the shadows. Zen gritted his teeth and closed his aching eyes. The pain was so terrible that Zen felt as though his eyes would pop out. At that moment, he even considered giving up. But after further thinking, Zen realized that he must be persistent. Before coming to Cloud Sect, he had been subject to inhumane levels of mental suffering. At that time, dominated by the intent of the Cyan Dragon, he was torn and smashed unceasingly. The pain he had suffered when he was still at the Luo house was more intolerable than what he was experiencing now. This pain is nothing, I should just treat it as exercise for my soul. Zen murmured in a bid to encourage himself to stay strong. He shook his head and tried to work up the courage to continue walking into the hall. Soon, Zen found that he could march further into the hall for Tier 4 cultivation methods. As he approached the small wooden bookcase, despite the attacks of the shadows, Zen noticed that there was a passageway behind the hall. Why would there be a passageway here? Isn't the hall for Tier 4 cultivation methods the last hall? Zen was a little shocked. Ever since he was a child, Zen had heard that there were only 4 tiers of cultivation methods. He had never heard of a cultivation method higher than Tier 4. All of a sudden, his curiosity was aroused. Perhaps I should enter the passageway and see if there are any higher tier cultivation methods, thought Zen. Still undecided, Zen took a minute to skim the bookcase in this hall. Tier 4 cultivation methods highly tempted Zen. Earlier, access to a Tier 3 cultivation method would have pleased Zen. He had never dreamed of being in a position to access a Tier 4 cultivation method. After hesitating and thinking for a while, Zen found that he couldn't abjure his curiosity. Others didn't have a chance to enter the hall for Tier 4 cultivation methods, but he did. Now that he had come this far, why shouldn't he try to find out whether there were higher tier cultivation methods? At this thought, Zen decided to explore the passageway. The passageway was not wide or spacious. It wasn't well decorated either. The floors and walls of the corridor had rotten over time. As soon as Zen entered the corridor, which was about 10 feet long, he felt a reprieve from the attack of the purple shadows. The overwhelming intent of the vengeful beast doesn't exist here. Zen wondered. Curious and bewildered, Zen marched ahead. At the end of the corridor was a stone chamber. The chamber was circular, and not very big. In the center stood a black monument. Zen's eyes widened when he realized that this chamber was a graveyard. As soon as this thought dawned on Zen, a supernatural beast formed by condensed purple light rushed out of the monument. The monster resembled one of the purple shadows Zen had encountered inside the hall for Tier 4 cultivation methods. Comparatively, it looked more real in this chamber. It was purple all over and looked lifelike. A deep hatred could be seen in its eyes. Oh, this is the vengeful beast's graveyard. Then, this monster is perhaps the soul of the dead vengeful beast. This beast is so indomitable that its intent is still perceivable in this space even though it has been dead for many years. The intent of the vengeful beast is still remarkable as well. But who on earth killed the vengeful beast here? Zen whispered as he carefully observed the monster. The soul of the vengeful beast was much stronger than the intangible shadows. Besides, Zen felt more pressure from this monster. The spiritual attack of the monster was so strong that Zen felt as though someone was pounding on his head with a hammer when the beast glared at him. Zen had put himself in extreme danger. His soul would be torn away in a flash if the vengeful beast's soul attacked him. If that happened, Zen would turn into a soulless idiot. As soon as he realized the danger that lay ahead, Zen winced and stepped back in fear. He didn't want to disturb the soul of the vengeful beast and accidentally invite its brutal wrath. But when Zen turned around to leave, he saw that the intangible shadows he had left behind in the hall had blocked the passageway. A bitter smile grew on his face when Zen realized the trap he had stepped into. Cloud sect is so insidious. I just want to choose a book on a cultivation method. Is it necessary to set such dangerous traps? Zen couldn't help sighing. What Zen didn't know was that very few people at Cloud sect could enter the hall for Tier 4 cultivation methods. The power of one's soul was not associated with his or her strength. Even powerful people who had reached the nature level would be unable to step into the hall for Tier 4 cultivation methods if their soul wasn't powerful enough. Such people would be never able to enter the tomb behind the hall. When Zen took a few steps back to get away from the soul of the vengeful beast, the intangible shadows in the passageway flew straight towards him like frightened bats. At the same time, the soul of the vengeful beast roared and abruptly jumped to attack Zen. Now the situation was indeed terrible. At that moment, Zen was so panicked that he couldn't think clearly. After quickly weighing his options, Zen rushed toward the intangible shadows in the passageway. He knew that he would be in extreme agony if the shadows attacked his soul. Zen also understood that it would be better to suffer pain from the attacks of the shadows than to be turned into an idiot by the soul behind him. Despite his swift action, the soul of the vengeful beast was faster. It almost came behind Zen in the blink of an eye. Ow! The vengeful beast's soul uttered a weird shriek. It was only about several inches away from Zen. If he turned to look, Zen was certain that he would be able to see his terrified expression in its dark eyes. At this critical moment, the huge furnace in his brain rotated slowly. From deep within him, a low growl was heard from a dragon. It's the growling sound uttered by the sculpture of the cyan dragon. As soon as the fearsome dragon growl was heard, the purple shadows that were attacking Zen dispersed for fear of being attacked by the dragon. Likewise, the vengeful beast's soul jumped away from Zen. It was almost as if the vengeful beast's soul had been scorched from being too close to Zen. From a distance, it studied Zen as if on guard. Its dark eyes were full of fear. To Zen, it seemed as though the vengeful beast's soul was in a dilemma. On one hand, it wanted to rush fiercely toward Zen, but it didn't. Instead, it clawed the floor every time the dragon growled fiercely. Then the soul let out a low howl. This brought a smile to Zen's face. He hadn't thought that the shadows and the vengeful beast were naturally fearful of the cyan dragon's growl. The vengeful beast's soul winced every time Zen took a step toward it. As Zen walked over to it, one step after another without stopping, the vengeful beast's soul jumped back onto the tombstone before letting out a ferocious howl. At last, the soul retreated into the black tombstone. Its grudges were evidently manifested in its howl. These were also perceived by Zen. Just now, Zen was in grave danger. His soul would have been killed had the cyan dragon not awoken and come to his rescue. But now, Zen had gotten past the dangers. Because of that, a flat smile grew on Zen's face. Then, he began to explore the stone chamber. When he had first entered this chamber, Zen had noticed a bookcase near the black monument. He walked toward the bookcase. When close enough, he saw that the bookcase contained 2 books on cultivation methods. Why are there only 2 books on cultivation methods? What on earth are they about? Wondered Zen. Zen reached out and took one of the 2 books off the bookcase. This book looked very old and shabby. Since a thick layer of dust covered the book and he was unable to read its title, Zen patted the book to remove the dust. It was then that he could see several big words on the cover. Heavenly Ogre Fist. Chapter 37, Hell Mountain. The book in Zen's hands was on fist position. It depended a lot on attacking skills. Zen turned to the first page gingerly. What caught his eyes was that the page was filled with small and closely written words. Zen soon realized that this was a translation of ogre language. The knowledge in this book apparently came from the ogres, and someone had the skills to translate ogre language. Zen was clueless as to who could have translated the text. As per the words, is this a cultivation method for ogres? Zen was puzzled. The heavenly ogre body refining formulation was a cultivation method for ogres only. Zen knew that cultivation methods for ogres were highly demanding. To practice them, a person would require strong physical strength. As it was known to all, the strength of the human body would improve greatly after the body had been refined. However, compared to ogres, humans were still far weaker. The body of an ogre, obviously, was not on the same level as a human. For example, the physical strength of humans at the bone refining level was about the same as that of a 4 or 5-year-old ogre child. Of course, this was just for general people, not Zen. Evil Lan had refined his body, and the strength of Zen's body was now comparable to a top-grade mysterious weapon. Therefore, the demanding body strength required to practice this cultivation method might be an impossible threshold for most humans, but not for Zen. It was tailored for him for sure. Zen put the Heavenly Ogre Fist book into the space ring and left the chamber. When he re-entered the hall for Tier 4 cultivation method, Zen found that an old man dressed in white was looking at him with bright eyes. Zen studied the old man. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, graceful and noble. Zen felt relieved because he did not sense any hostility from the old man. The power of the Heavenly Ogre Fist is great, but it is extremely demanding on a human's body strength. It is also difficult to cultivate. I am sure you know this. It can be said that your soul's strength is far superior to others as you entered the passageway and returned. If your soul is strong enough, you can choose methods like the dark meditation and blood kill. Why would you choose Heavenly Ogre Fist? You know this is a very complicated method for human beings. The old man spoke to Zen in a faint voice. I saw that this cultivation method was placed behind the hall for Tier 4 cultivation method. So, I believe it to be more powerful than Tier 4 cultivation method. Zen replied truthfully. He was not good at lying, and so, he decided to share his reason for selecting the cultivation method with the old man. Zen's honesty surprised the old man since he did not expect Zen to be so forthcoming. Then the old man shook his head and said, "It is true that the 2 books inside the tomb are far stronger than Tier 4 cultivation method, but you should practice the cultivation method that suits you. You should understand this. I think you had better return the Heavenly Ogre Fist, and choose another one. What do you think?" To Zen, it sounded like the old man was trying to persuade him not to take Heavenly Ogre Fist. But then again, since he had chosen this book, and he had not violated any rules, Zen was unwilling to return the book. So, instead of giving the old man a straight answer, Zen changed the subject and asked, "Is it really far stronger than Tier 4 cultivation method? I have heard that all cultivation methods in the world are divided into 4 tiers. How can Heavenly Ogre Fist be stronger than Tier 4 cultivation methods?" Zen tried to sound innocent as he put forward this question. The old man smiled a little. He seemed to see through Zen's trick. "Since you are unwilling to return Heavenly Ogre Fist, then take it as per your wish. As for your question pertaining to the 4 tiers of cultivation methods, that is what we tell ordinary people. We live in a mysterious world. Its secrets are endless. How can cultivation methods be limited to just 4 tiers? The book in your hand is a Tier 5 cultivation method from the ogres." Tier 5 cultivation method. Zen was surprised, and his eyes opened wide. Zen had thought that Tier 4 cultivation method was the highest level. What he did not expect was that there was Tier 5 cultivation method. This was beyond his expectation. Seeing Zen's reaction, the old man was not surprised at all. He laughed again. "The higher you stand, the further you can see. Let me tell you, the Tier 5 cultivation method may not necessarily be the strongest method." "Is there a cultivation method much stronger than Tier 5 cultivation method?" Zen asked excitedly. This time, the old man did not answer his question directly. He gave a vague response. "There are no boundaries in humans' capability." As the old man spoke, he placed a finger on Zen's chest and continued, "Let us not discuss this. Since you have chosen the Heavenly Ogre Fist and insist on keeping it, I will not stop you. This book has been here for a long time, and I never thought that an outer disciple would be capable of taking it. I feel that perhaps it is fate that led you to this book. But this cultivation method involves many other factors. If someone outside asks you what you have taken," the old man stopped speaking for long enough to wave at the cultivation method hall. A book from the cabinet flew over to them. With the book in hand, the old man continued, "You should tell them that this is what you have chosen." Zen took the book from the old man and turned it around in his hand. As he looked at the book, Zen's eyes brightened when he saw the words, "Spiritual Thorn," on the cover. There were so many books on Tier 4 cultivation method on the bookcase in this hall. Zen had not expected that he would get an opportunity to take 2. Zen laughed with joy before placing the book inside the space ring. Then Zen looked at the old man and thanked him by cupping his hands left over right and raising them chest high as a salute. After that, Zen turned with the intention of leaving the hall. Before he could take a step, the old man stopped him. "Wait, aren't you curious about my identity?" "What?" Zen stopped and turned to face the old man. In all this time, He had not thought to ask the old man his name. Zen raised his hand and slapped it on his forehead. Please forgive my lack of manners. You are. That's fine. I have to say that you overplayed your part. The old man waved his hands and laughed. He knew that the boy did not really care about who he was. But this was not something he needed to care about. He continued, although Cloud Sect is large, if you are extraordinary, I am sure that we will meet again, sooner or later. Knowing that he had not annoyed the old man, Zen smiled at him, then turned and left. The old man watched as Zen left. Then he sighed and whispered, I did not expect that after so many years, this book will finally be claimed. I don't think anyone will believe that this was not heaven's will. Since Zen had left the hall, he did not hear the old man's words. Even if he had heard what the old man had said, he would not understand the meaning. When Zen entered the hall for the Tier 3 cultivation method, he saw that all other people had left. Even the hall for the Tier 2 cultivation method was empty. It was not advisable to linger in the heavenly library, as over time, it became harder to bear the pressure of intent of the vengeful beast. It was natural that the others would leave soon after selecting the appropriate cultivation method. Zen was the last to leave the heavenly library. When he stepped out, the disciples of the other 32 peaks had already left. Only the disciples of Drizzle Peak were waiting for him. I am so sorry to have kept you waiting. Zen bowed with hands folded as he apologized. That's fine. We are brothers of Drizzle Peak, and we should be concerned about each other, now and in the future. Well, welcome to Drizzle Peak, said an outer disciple as he patted Zen on the shoulder. This group of outer disciples who had picked Drizzle Peak was from low clans. None of these disciples were from noble clans. So they were congenial with each other. Master Orasu had been standing in the distance and studying something. When she saw Zen, she smiled and asked, Did you enter the Tier 4 cultivation method hall? Only the few people present at the Tier 3 cultivation method hall knew that Zen had entered the Tier 4 cultivation method hall. Master Orasu must have heard about this from other masters. The outer disciples of Drizzle Peak were surprised by what Master Orasu had said. They looked at Zen with big round eyes. They had initially thought that Zen had stepped out last as he had spent too much time studying the books and making his choice. No one thought that he had entered the Tier 4 cultivation method hall. They all knew that the deeper they went, the stronger their soul needed to be. How strong was Zen's soul? They were in awe of what Zen had accomplished. Zen thought that Master Orasu might ask him about what cultivation method he had chosen. Since the old man in white had presented him with spiritual thorn, Zen decided to tell Master Orasu about the book. However, before he could say anything, she swung her right hand and said, There is no need to tell others about what cultivation method you have chosen. You must learn to keep your secrets in Cloud Sect. Let's leave now. We should get back to Drizzle Peak before dark. The other people present did not ask Zen any more questions. Seeing that all disciples were here, Master Orasu led them away from the heavenly library. The walk took about 4 hours in Cloud Sect before a steep mountain appeared in front of them. This was Drizzle Peak, one of the 33 peaks. On Drizzle Peak, neat rows of pavilions had been built. Seas of clouds and fog enshrouded the peak, giving the impression that this was beautiful heaven. After Master Orasu took her disciples up to Drizzle Peak, she spoke to a few outer disciples briefly. Then she left in a hurry. It seemed that she had many other things to do. One of the outer disciples stepped forward and said, to Zen and the other disciples, My name is Shan Zhou. I am here to welcome all of you to Drizzle Peak. I will take care of you all. After they bowed to each other, Shan Zhou informed them about all the procedures. For example, changing disciple cards, picking up uniforms for outer disciples, arranging accommodation, and so on. After Nori received the white robe of an outer disciple, he could not wait to try it on. He then said with pride, Haha, I am an outer disciple of Cloud Sect now. This uniform looks awesome. It will be an honor to wear it and walk on the streets of the imperial capital. I would like to see if anyone dares to bully me then. Shan Zhou could not help laughing out, this is only a white robe. If you practice hard and become an inner disciple, you will be more proud to have earned a black robe. Nori did not feel embarrassed. He replied with a smile, Well, that is a long way off. Nori, the inner disciples are ascended from the outer disciples, so why deny yourself? Shan was an enthusiastic and optimistic person. He not only comforted the outer disciples but also explained the rules to them without missing any detail. The rules of Cloud Sect are very complicated, but the most important one is strength. Shan looked at the disciples before continuing, the rules have been set to protect the weak. If you want to set the rules, you have to be either strong or talented. These are the only two ways to get others to surrender to you. Shan's words struck Zen. He knew that this was true for not only Cloud Sect, but also in the Burning Sky Empire, and even the entire eastern region. Whoever had the most power was the boss. This was a universal principle. If he was strong, why would he come to Cloud Sect? If he was strong, he could rescue Yan from Hell Mountain with just a word. Unfortunately, he was weak. Sorrow filled his eyes at the thought of his sister, Yan. She was the one person about whom he was most concerned. He erased the sadness from his eyes and said, Shan, I want to ask you something. Shan maintained his warm smile, nodded and said, sure, what can I help you with? Where is Perdition Mountain in Cloud Sect? Zen asked cautiously. Shan's eyebrows rose at the question. When he replied, his pitch was higher. Hell Mountain, why, you ask about that place? Oh, no special reason. I am just curious, Zen replied. Hell Mountain is an independent mountain in the northwest corner of Cloud Sect. Anyone who has made a serious mistake or has broken the rules will be locked there. I certainly haven't been there, but I have heard that the environment in Hell Mountain is awful. Thousands of disciples have been locked there. When Shan finished, he looked at Zen's face and asked again, do you have a friend who is locked in Hell Mountain? Zen did not answer this question. Instead, he asked, is there a way to enter Hell Mountain? Chapter 38. Endless Troubles. There are two ways. Shan extended two fingers as he spoke. The first is to spend 100 points in visiting Hell Mountain. Points. Since his came to Cloud Sect, Zen had been bombarded with references to points many times. Previously during the initial exam, the old man told him of the points necessary to enter the powerful pressure space. Before participating in the blooded test, Zen was in a fight with members of the Wang clan. At last, the inner disciple who had started the fight had been punished with a penalty of 1,000 points. What use do these points have? How can we obtain them? Zen asked eagerly. Within Cloud Sect, it is impossible for disciples to do anything without these points. And all of you should be well informed of their functions. Shanzhou then began to lecture them. Outer disciples need to obtain sufficient points to be accepted as inner disciples. Points are also needed to swap elixirs used for cultivation and to eat in live. These points are recorded in your disciple cards. How can we obtain 100 points within a short period? Zen, at that moment, cared less about the use of these points and more about how to earn enough points to visit Yan at Hell Mountain. Masters of Cloud Sect will assign daily tasks to you. On completion of these tasks, you will gain the corresponding number of points. But outer disciples normally get fewer points. And it may take half a year for outer disciples to earn 100 points. By the way, since my admission to Cloud Sect, I am in possession of less than 100 points, Shan explained with a forced smile. Half a year, Zen found it unacceptable to wait that long. He was eager to find a time-efficient solution. Well, you can swap 200 cubic crystals for 100 points, Shan suggested. Upon hearing that, Zen was happy because he had many cubic crystals in his space ring. However, the exchange rate worried him. Any outer disciple of Cloud Sect could become a millionaire at this exchange rate after resuming a civilian life. Even if I swap 100 cubic crystals for 50 points, how would I collect the rest? Zen was overcome with anxiety. It would take at least 3 months to complete enough tasks to gain the remaining 50 points. However, Zen was desperate to reach Hell Mountain and see Yan. Zen was eager to hear of the other alternative to reach Hell Mountain from Shan. Shan then suggested that if Zen were to violate the rules of Cloud Sect, he would be exiled to Perdition Mountain. Quote. Zen remained silent for a long while. He chuckled as he thought, a good alternative, indeed. But that option was not feasible for Zen. Without the backing of a noble clan or a patron at Cloud Sect, Zen had to bide his time patiently. Zen told himself to wait for an opportune moment to rescue Yan from Hell Mountain. Over the following few days, Zen applied himself to the Tier 4 and Tier 5 cultivation methods as per the books he had gained from the Heavenly Library. He didn't undertake any task. Even though Zen was incredibly strong and gifted, it was impossible for him to master both texts within a short period. Zen scanned through the book on Heavenly Ogre Fist and came to realize the intricacies and mysteries therein. It was no wonder that the old man in the Heavenly Library had said that this cultivation method would be too challenging for most humans. A good command of demonic life energy was the essence of practicing Heavenly Ogre Fist. The purple light fist technique that Zen had previously practiced would produce arrays of purple light, virtually the life energy thereof. Life energy varied with a person's cultivation method. For instance, the weapon refiner Evil Lan was an expert in producing a lotus-shaped fire, which was a type of life energy. Zen was intelligent enough to master the essence of purple light fist within the first 3 days of practicing this technique. The first page of the book on Heavenly Ogre Fist included an illustration in which an ogre posed in a tricky position. The ogre's arms were stretched outward, and his legs were bent in a difficult position. This posture was hard for Zen to mimic. After trying and failing several times, Zen finally managed to get the position correct. After that, he began to follow the mental cultivation methods illustrated and exercised from inner to outer. But all his efforts proved futile. The first time Zen tried, there was no positive result. The outcome was equally depressing the second time. The third time, Zen was quite patient and disciplined with this daily exercise. He knew that he would not be able to master ancient texts overnight. The 50th time, the 100th time, the 200th time, over the 3 days, Zen confined himself to his room and applied himself to the text, only to get nowhere. Thus, Zen was a bit confused. Zen was mentally prepared for the abstruseness of the Heavenly Ogre Fist. The cultivation method from the ogres was new to him. It required the cultivator to be able to circulate his overall system skillfully. And it would daunt most cultivators, considering its adverse impact on internal organs. Luckily, Zen was born with a strong constitution and could easily avoid this problem. I followed the cultivation method strictly, only to get nowhere. Perhaps something is amiss, Zen concluded. With this thought in mind, Zen decided to cast aside Heavenly Ogre Fist and concentrated on the Tier 4 cultivation method. Spiritual Thorn proved more manageable for Zen to practice than Heavenly Ogre Fist, though the former was quite demanding in terms of soul strength. The Tier 4 cultivation method required Zen to divide his soul from his body. In doing so, he would be able to create a long spiritual thorn with the power similar to that of the intent of the vengeful beast. Thus, Zen would be able to attack his rival off guard. Such an attack would lead to temporal dizziness for the rival. The mastery of this martial text would make a difference in a life and death battle. However, the cultivation method had a flaw as well. A spiritual thorn attack would be futile against a master who had a greater soul strength than him. Zen considered himself to be a master, if not a leading master, at his present level. It indeed took only 3 days for Zen to learn how to master dividing his soul from his body as was required by the text. While Zen had achieved the objective of the cultivation method, separating his soul from his body, he still had a lot to learn when it came to using his life vitality at this initial stage of practice. The essence of this skill and strength required entry into the nature level to produce the life vitality that could be leveraged to attack a rival. But dividing his soul from his body, as per the martial text, needed more soul refining rather than level cultivation. The human soul was so vulnerable that once divided from the body, it could be attacked by evil. A cultivator with weak soul strength would be in grave danger. But Zen was an exception. Since Zen had learned how to divide his soul from his body, he now began practicing the transformation of his soul into a thorn with which he could stab. This technique was challenging for Zen. Transforming a soul into a thorn with which to stab a rival was easier said than done. Although Zen was able to follow the instructions in the book easily, and he had learned how to turn his soul into a thorn, each time he tried, Zen felt an uneasiness in his heart. Overwhelmed by this feeling, Zen failed to complete the cultivation method. After spending 10 days in his room practicing this cultivation method, Zen found that he hadn't been able to make a breakthrough despite intensive research. At last, Zen came to realize that he had to conquer the insurmountable. Well, from hard practice comes virtuosity. Finally, Zen decided to take a reprieve by looking around Drizzle Peak. He had sequestered himself in his room for so long that Zen felt that a walk would help clear his mind. Zen's extensive practice since his admission to Drizzle Peak attracted the attention of many outer disciples. When Zen walked out of his tiny room and came across a mirror, he was stunned to see that his hair was disheveled and that he had grown a full beard. As Nori passed by, he scrunched his nose and demanded that Zen take a shower. Drizzle Peak boasted of various living facilities including bathrooms, dining rooms, gardens, and tea lobbies. After taking a shower, Zen and Nori went to dine together. The dining room was featured with properly arranged tables and chairs and exquisite decorations worthy of a royal palace. After they sat down, delicacies were placed on the table in front of them. It was worthwhile to mention that dragon teeth rice, a tribute from the eastern region, was available to the privileged of an ordinary clan and to any outer disciple of Cloud sect. This type of rice was tender, fresh, sweet, and aromatic. When the two of them were about to enjoy their meal, several people entered the dining hall and headed straight for Zen and Nori. "This seat is reserved for me. Move aside," the leader of this group challenged Zen. Chapter 39, Challenge. Nori inconspicuously pulled Zen's sleeve and whispered, "Let's find somewhere else to sit." The man seemed to cause trouble deliberately, so Nori thought they'd better leave. Zen didn't acknowledge the rude disciple's demand. He continued to eat his food quietly. "I told you to get out of my seat. Did you hear me?" yelled the young man. To emphasize his point, the man slammed his hand on the table made of hard rock maple. When he withdrew his hand, a clear palm mark had been imprinted on the table. This disciple must be very strong. Zen remained unaffected by the man's angry display. He chose to chew his food and pretend as though he didn't care about what was happening around him. Pooh. When the man received no response, he spat into Zen's plate and sneered, "Haha. Enjoy your meal." Before the rude disciple could finish sneering, Zen had kicked his chair back, stood, grabbed the man by the collar, and clenched his left hand as though ready to punch the guy. At the moment, Nori held Zen's left arm and blurted, "Hey brother, calm down. You are not allowed to fight here. In accordance with the rules of Cloud sect, disciples who battle with each other will be penalized with a loss of points. The moment you do not have enough points, you will either be kicked out of Cloud sect or confined in Hell Mountain." Hearing Nori's words, Zen relaxed. Ever since his admission to Drizzle Peak, Zen had been informed of the rules governing Cloud sect. He knew what Nori was saying was right. Since Zen did not enjoy a high status in Cloud sect, he had to obey the rules. Both Sean and Master Su had told him this many times. The young man was apparently prepared to provoke Zen to make him break the rules. Perhaps he intended to drive Zen out of Cloud sect. When Zen understood this, he shelved his temper, loosened his grip, and stared at the young man for a moment before saying, "I don't know who ordered you to look for trouble. But to be honest, I doubt if your intelligence is good enough even to be considered as average. I can't believe you would think of such a stupid idea to aggravate me. Since you want a fight, I'll give you a chance to challenge me. How about that?" Hearing Zen's words, the young man cracked up, "Haha. It's just what I intended to say. So, let's fight in the battle ring, and don't try to escape like a cowardly chicken." Cloud sect had stipulated that disciples could not fight each other privately, or they would be severely punished. However, Cloud sect was a martial arts shrine. People who cultivated martial arts for long periods were usually aggressive. Since Cloud sect had millions of disciples, conflicts between students were inevitable. The solution was to go to the battle ring. Every peak within Cloud sect had a few battle rings. "Hey, guys, just calm down. There's no need to go to the battle ring," said Sean nervously. He had just entered the dining hall when the face-off between Zen and this rude disciple had started. He had witnessed this fierce scene and rushed over to persuade both men to back down. "Idiot off, Sean. You are nothing. This is none of your business," the young man sneered. Then he turned to face Zen and continued, "This guy has agreed to fight a duel with me in the battle ring. It's too late to change what's going to happen now. I can wait 3 days for the battle. You'd better prepare the ground to bury his corpse." After saying that, he turned and left. "Zen, why couldn't you just ignore his provocation?" asked Sean anxiously. Nori came up and explained, "Sean, it's not Zen's fault. It was that guy who came looking for trouble. Even so, you should try to avoid conflict. That guy is Liu Shu. Do you know in terms of strength that guy ranks 30th from among tens of thousands of outer disciples in Drizzle Peak? Though he has not arrived at the nature level, he is still half a step into the nature level." It was no wonder that Sean was so anxious. Zen was merely at the top of the organ refining level, but he had agreed to duel with Liu Shu, a cultivator who was half a step into the nature level. Of course, Sean thought Zen was crazy. Half a step into the nature level. Ranking 30th. Gosh, what can we do? Nori was stunned after he heard about Leo's strength ranking. Although Nori knew that Zen was much stronger than an ordinary cultivator at the same level, the strength gap between Zen and Leo was still too big. Half a step into the nature level. Zen frowned. In the blooded test, he, by virtue of his strength, killed a level 5 unreal beast, an ogre whose power was comparable to that of a human at the nature level. However, Zen killed the ogre by coincidence. The ogre was similar to a human at the nature level only by strength and defense. Moreover, he had neither of the wisdom and skills that a cultivator at the nature level should have. He couldn't even control or use his life vitality. On the other hand, the flying knife had played an essential role at the critical moment. If he had not used the flying knife, Zen would have failed the blooded test. In my opinion, we'd better tell Master Su about this matter, and Zen should not go to the battle ring, said Sean, while thinking of Master Su. The masters in Drizzle Peak didn't behave like cultivation teachers for disciples. For example, Master Su generally did not interfere with the cultivation of her disciples. Every day, the masters issued tasks, organized various activities, maintained order, and distributed rewards. However, they did not teach disciples how to practice directly. By contrast, they were more like administrators of Drizzle Peak. Sean's idea seemed to be a feasible alternative. Maybe it was better to let Master Orasu deal with the matter. After silently mulling over the situation for a long time, Zen shook his head and said, "That guy was deliberately looking to cause trouble. I can't avoid it, not to mention I have already agreed to go to the battle ring. If I surrender because of such a small challenge, my cultivation determination will be adversely affected." The path of cultivation was full of thorns, and every cultivator had to rely on persistence. Those with great achievements had shown strong persistence levels. If Zen flinched in the face of this challenge, his persistence and prospects for the cultivation of martial arts would gradually fade. Moreover, Zen was curious to find out who had incited Leo to come looking for trouble. Zen did not know who the mastermind was. Billy, or the Fang clan, perhaps it was Chad from the Zoog clan. Zen didn't want to guess. No matter who was going to make trouble for him, he would resist. "Zen, you alas," sighed Sean. He seemed more anxious than Zen. Many outer disciples who had witnessed the fight between Zen and Leo, now shook their heads and looked at Zen with pity. They were all amazed that an outer disciple who had recently joined Drizzle Peak dared to challenge Leo in the battle ring. How stupid he was. In the battle ring, even if a disciple was killed, no one was to blame for it. In general, if there was no big vendetta, two disciples didn't need to fight in the battle ring. Zen might very well die 3 days later. However, Zen seemed very calm. He even comforted Sean, "It's all right. Just remember to come to the battle ring to cheer me on." Half a step into the nature level. The situation was a rare opportunity for Zen. During the arduous fight with Evil Lan, Zen persisted and endured until he won. His reward was reaching the organ refining level. However, at that time, Evil Lan was close to his strength limit. Despite that, Zen had reached the top of the organ refining level and had lit up 2 dragon scales in the giant furnace in his mind. As far as strength was concerned, he was much stronger than a cultivator at the marrow refining level. It seemed risky for Zen to accept the challenge of a cultivator who was half a step into the nature level, but Zen still had a chance to fight and perhaps, even win. Sean was still anxious about the duel. Zen was only at the organ refining level. Furthermore, he had entered Drizzle Peak only half a month ago. How dare he accept Leo's challenge in the battle ring? Was he a fool? After Zen and Nori left the dining hall, Sean considered his options for a long while. Finally, he decided to report the matter to Master Su. Master Su had spoken with Sean privately a few days ago. She had instructed him to inform her whenever there was news about special matters and performance about Zen. However, Sean didn't expect that Master Su would show no emotion after hearing the news. She just explained that she would watch the duel 3 days later. Sean was tempted to ask why Master Su did not think of stopping the duel between Zen and Leo. Of course, Aura Su would not interrupt the duel. Her grand goal was to produce a super disciple who would be the most powerful disciple in Cloud Sect, for Drizzle Peak. In fact, Zen was only one of Aura's many candidates. There had been a few inner disciples with great potential in Drizzle Peak. As far as their refining level was concerned, these inner disciples were far beyond Zen. But somehow, Aura had a hunch that sooner or later, Zen would grow in terms of strength. And when that happened, people including Aura would admire or be even awed by Zen. As for the situation, Aura would not intervene a lot. She believed that only by experiencing the situation of life and death would disciples be inspired to reach their potential. Thus, even if Leo hadn't come looking for trouble, Aura would have picked a few disciples to make trouble for Zen. Chapter 40. The state of completely forgetting oneself. Zen was foolish to accept Leo's challenge. If I were him, I wouldn't have accepted Leo's challenge, and I would have kept quiet. Well, he's probably arrogant enough to think he's invincible. You know, he just ranked first place in the entrance exam and became an outer disciple. People like him usually end up paying with their blood. That's not what I heard. I heard Zen deliberately approached Leo and challenged him. What a hostile man. The fight was the newest and hottest gossip that spread like wildfire through the Drizzle Peak. Zen and Leo were going to fight each other. Sitting on his bed, Zen, indifferent to the gossip, was meditating to continue practicing the spiritual thorn. His engagement with Leo was days away. Since he accepted the challenge, Zen knew that if he backed out, he would be labeled a coward. If I can master the skill of turning my soul into a thorn, according to the spiritual thorn, I will have a better chance of prevailing in the battle ring, determined Zen silently. Turning a soul into a thorn, he murmured to himself. So then how do I turn my soul into a sharp thorn? The soul was a formless disembodiment of a person's perception of himself. Therefore, people usually unknowingly recreated their soul as their physical form during meditation. So, Zen's soul appeared as Zen looked in reality. In this way, unless Zen forgot himself, his soul would remain as he was, and couldn't change into something else, not even a thorn. Only through fully forgetting myself will my soul be transformed into another form, he reasoned inwardly. As he reasoned the puzzle out in his mind, the startling thought slammed into him. I see. So, the key to mastering this skill is to disregard how I see myself. He cried excitedly. But, how do I achieve that state? To completely abandon how I see myself? How is that even possible? Zen's brows were furrowed as he weighed the concept thoroughly. Then, he shut his eyes, attempting to forget himself. More than an hour passed and he sensed nothing but waves of weariness. Zen was frustrated and growing depressed. He was glad to have two top-grade refinement methods, but unfortunately, he didn't seem to have the wit to learn either of them, which was a severe blow to his ego. Feeling glum, Zen left his room and trudged up the steep trail in the Drizzle Peak. It was well before 5 o'clock in the morning, and the sun hadn't risen. There was a complete, utter stillness. About 65 feet down the trail, he came to a sheer cliff that stretched out to form a natural platform for people to enjoy the scenery. Using the natural features, the expert craftsmen of the Cloud sect built an elaborate pavilion into the platform. There was no one in the pavilion at the moment. Zen strode into the pavilion, gazing out at the view stretching in front of him as far as the eye could see. A sea of unbroken clouds surrounded the rolling peaks in the distance. The peak closest was the Jeweled Peak, which ranked in 21st place, while the Azure Peak, which was 5th place, was farther away. These mountains had stood in the universe for thousands or even millions of years. Regardless of how outstandingly gifted the disciples were, for these peaks a disciple's existence was a passing show. Standing among the majestic peaks, Zen felt as insignificant as a grain of sand in the ocean. Suddenly, Zen felt his heartstrings being tugged as he looked out at the magnificence of the spectacular mountain range. Sitting there, Zen closed his eyes and slowly imagined himself shrinking even smaller. First to dust, since it was smaller than sand, and then even smaller. Slowly, Zen felt himself becoming small enough to be ignored, into nothing. With an internal crash, a huge golden door swung open in Zen's mind. At this point, Zen found his way to the sphere of nothingness. When people felt gone completely, they were within reach of forgetting themselves. When Zen opened his eyes, the scene he had been looking at was no longer in view. When he imagined himself as a tree, it was as if he were one, and when he perceived himself as a blade of grass, he was able to become the grass. In short, he sensed that he could turn into anything in the world. In that fleeting moment, Zen decided to test a theory about his purpose in mastering the skill of turning his soul into a thorn, as described in the refinement method, the spiritual thorn. With a brief thought, a sharp, translucent gray thorn thrust out from the middle of his browline. Finally, he did it. He was successful in transforming his soul into a thorn. Because the sharp translucent thorn was manifested by Zen's soul, it was invisible to all but Zen. Therefore, there was no way for others to guard against it absolutely. For a short time, Zen practiced the spiritual thorn moves. The range of his attack using the thorn was only about 3 feet, which fell short of what he'd read. People within 3,000 feet are unable to defend themselves against it, in the refinement method. Zen had crossed a bridge of sorts by attaining the state of forgetting himself, and now his way would be much easier. Zen couldn't help smiling proudly. The match coming up in 3 days had been concerning him, but now he was looking forward to it. The next 3 days flew by. At Drizzle Peak, competing in the battle ring was always a significant affair. The audience was able to watch the actual battle along with the energy that was seldom experienced during ordinary refinement practices in the ring. Many outer disciples learned more by watching a battle and could take what they saw into their refinement process, which allowed them to make breakthroughs of their own. Plus, with how mundane the daily practices were, a fight for revenge was in itself quite entertaining to watch. What made it more exciting was the considerable gap in the strengths between the two fighters competing, with one at the organ refining level and the other half step into the nature level. If Leo, half step into the nature level, was comparable to a lion, then Zen at the organ refining level was akin to a rat. They were not on the same level at all. Most people were certain that the competition would be finished fast and that it was a given that the outcome would be an overwhelming victory by Leo. Leo got to the battle ring early, accompanied by his companions. Today there was also a middle-aged man with Leo. The clothing the middle-aged man wore denoted he was a servant. He was wearing a gray cloth and a bandana on his head. When the outer disciples noticed the pattern with the 8 diagrams embroidered on his gray cloth, no one dared to look down upon him. The 8 diagrams were 8 trigrams used to represent the fundamental principles of reality in the Taoist beliefs, and seen as a range of 8 interrelated concepts. The emblem belonged to one of the 7 top noble clans, the Zhou family. The top 7 noble clans were the most powerful and influential families in the entire empire. Although the middle-aged man was a servant, no outer disciple at the Cloud sect could afford to offend him, since he was a servant of the Zhou family. My master said this man must die today, no matter what the cost is, emphasized the servant strongly. There was a condescending expression in his eyes as he glared at Leo. Even though Leo was half-step into the nature level, the servant showed the barest respect to Leo. A refiner who was half-step into the nature level was more or less a proud man. However, Leo, who was unhappy given the servant's attitude, tried not to show any expression. After all, his future depended on this servant's master. I know. He nodded and replied with as even a tone as possible. Don't worry. The intensity of attacks is uncontrolled in the battle ring. The cocky maggot is merely at the organ refining level, and yet, foolishly accepted my challenge. He is doomed to die. Satisfied with Leo's response, the servant nodded. Good. Don't you want to be promoted as an inner disciple? My master promises to assign you to the Blackrock Peak next month and advance you to the level as an inner disciple if you complete this task today. Leo was thrilled to hear the news. Many thanks to your master, stated Leo, giving a short bow as he hastened to express his gratitude. It was easy for members from noble clans to become inner disciples, but it was difficult for civilians like Leo. It had been 5 long years since he joined the Drizzle Peak, and in that time he had come a long way. Now, he was demon-bent on becoming an inner disciple. Throughout the 33 peaks, the treatment the inner disciples received differed vastly from how the outer disciples were treated. Inner disciples received the better elixirs for refining, along with various monthly payments and the places to practice their refining methods. To be initiated as an inner disciple of a peak, though, a disciple had to stand out from the tens of thousands of other outer disciples. While Leo was powerful and ranked 30th of the outer disciples at Drizzle Peak, every time he competed for a spot as an inner disciple, Leo fell short. After waiting for 5 long years, someone made Leo an offer to move him to the second-ranked peak, Blackrock, and even better, Leo would be promoted to an inner disciple, just as his patience ran out, and all he had to do was to kill Zen. It was too good a deal for Leo to pass up. It was impossible for him to not agree to the deal. As for Zen, since he only recently entered Drizzle Peak, Leo saw him as a stepping stone to a better future for himself and didn't care about him. On the verge of realizing his dreams, Leo's face brightened with excitement. An hour later, Leo's thrill was turning to anxiety, and time was moving too slowly. That guy wouldn't back out after agreeing to fight me, would he? He wondered, starting to doubt Zen was going to show. Because of Zen's tardiness, the other disciples standing around waiting started discussing whether he was going to show or not as well. Drizzle Peak had quite a few members, and the credibility of each disciple was essential. If Zen were to back out, his credibility would be shot. Zen apparently is wussing out. Shame, after all his big talk, he has cold feet. If this is the kind of person he is, Zen definitely has no future. Come on, let's go. There's nothing to see here. We might as well spend our time refining while waiting. I knew our Drizzle Peak had another loser. After waiting 2 hours, most of the spectators had lost patience and were about to leave. Having to wait so long for Zen, Leo was restless and losing his already short temper. Leo, you said Zen was going to fight you today. Why isn't he here then? Demanded the Zhu family manservant. Leo smiled humbly and responded, don't worry, Thomas. That guy wouldn't dare back out. Thomas Zhu sneered, good. His voice dripped sarcastically, I hope you aren't wasting my time and that you don't fail the master. I wouldn't dare do that. As Leo spoke, he glanced Zen out of the corner of his eye as he strode through the doorway and walked up to the battle.